Chapter 472. Every time Chu Chinga received one of Chu Tiannin's letters, she was extremely reluctant to open it. Ever since she'd entered the palace, Chu Tiannin had only sent her two kinds of secret missives. One was to teach her how to please Emperor Tianhui, while the other was to warn her not to have any designs on Han Yunqi. Chu Chinga clutched the letter tightly in her hands and refused to read it. Su Mama, who had accompanied her as part of her dowry, stood on one side for a long time before she couldn't help but speak up. Esteemed Wang Fei, perhaps eldest young master has some urgent business. It's better to hurry and take a look. What urgent business could he have? I'm in an abyss of suffering here, but he won't let me touch Han Yunqi. Secondly, he wants me to tolerate Empress Dowager Li and the rest. What's there to be anxious about? Chu Chinga gave a cold snort. Esteemed Wang Fei, eldest young master is right. His Majesty isn't blind. He can see everything that goes on in the imperial harem. We're new to the palace, so we should tolerate everything. First, we need to gain Emperor Tianhui's approval. If we overstep our bounds in the future, he'll only turn a blind eye to it, Su Mama coaxed. Over the past few days, noble consort Shue's little tricks had come one after another. Although none of them were major incidents, her personality couldn't stand it. If Big Brother hadn't stopped her, she would have poisoned noble consort Shue ages ago. Esteemed Wang Fei, didn't His Majesty keep you company in the imperial study these days? Even noble consort Shue was sent away. You still haven't vented your anger? Su Mama coaxed again. Vent my anger? Who does noble consort Shue think she is? Only by killing Han Yunqi will I feel better. Chu Chinga coldly spoke her mind. Su Mama was helpless. After some hesitation, she spoke up. Esteemed Wang Fei, this old servant doesn't understand one thing. Inciting discord between Han Yunqi and Empress Dowager Li is killing two birds with one stone. Why doesn't eldest young master agree to it? Even if we can't do that, eldest young master must have a better idea. After being warned to stay away from Han Yunqi time and time again, Chu Chinga had naturally considered this problem. She gave a cold snort and said, he and father are both afraid of offending His Highness Duke of Qin. Qin Mama didn't know what to say at esteemed noble consort's attitude. Although imperial consort Nyang Yang liked the Duke of Qin, she couldn't downplay her own prestige like this. Nyang Yang, it's better to take a look at the secret letter, Su Mama advised again. In the end, Chu Chinga obediently opened the letter. If Big Brother really had urgent business, she wouldn't be able to bear the responsibility. But Chu Chinga only grinned from ear to ear as soon as she read the letter. Wonderful. This is great. Big Brother finally understood. Her brother's secret letter actually told her to calm down and not to invite Han Yunqi into the palace in the near future. He had his own ways to sow discord between Empress Dowager Li and Han Yunqi. Su Mama was in disbelief. She took the secret letter and read it. It was true. Imperial consort, why is eldest young master here? Su Mama asked suspiciously. He must have thought things through and grown bolder. Chu Chinga didn't care so much. As long as she had her big brother's help, she refused to believe that she couldn't defeat Han Yunqi. As for Long Fei Yi, it wouldn't be good for him to keep getting involved in women's affairs, would it? That night, Chu Chinga was finally in a good mood. She slept peacefully, but one woman didn't sleep at all. Her eyes were wide open until daybreak. In the restaurant closest to the Duke of Qin's estate, Mu Ling had been sprawled in front of the window for an entire night, lost in thought. Although she didn't have much silver left on her, she still insisted on staying in the most expensive room, Sky Room 2. That was because Qi Brother had reserved Sky Room 1. It was most likely that he'd stay here as soon as he arrived in the capital. Ever since she'd stopped Han Yunqi's carriage last time, she'd arrived in Tianning's capital city. Since she couldn't find Qi Brother, she could only wait here. Although she didn't want to admit it, she was certain that Qi Brother would come looking for Han Yunqi one day. Recently, news of Medicine Ghost Valley selling medicine and collaborating with Han Yunqi to open a Medicine Ghost Valley in Tianning's capital city had spread like wildfire. Although she never asked about outside matters, she still paid attention to news from Medicine Ghost Valley. Although she abhorred Pill Fiend Valley's practice of storing medicinal herbs and not selling them, she still admired Gu Qi Sha's ability to concoct medicine. She couldn't figure out why Gu Qisha was willing to work with Han Yunqi in the first place. Why did he suddenly change his mind and agree to sell medicine? What the hell? Mu Ling was lost in thought when her stomach rumbled. She was hungry again. She'd been protected by her father ever since she was a child and rarely left the house. Although she didn't have the temper of a rich young lady, she was still a rich young lady. She'd never known the hardships of life. Now that she was wandering the streets, she didn't have enough silver in her purse to pay for her room. Her source of income had been cut off as well, making her feel terrible. Ever since her father told her to sneak back to Medicine City and stay in the Mu clan's secret room to continue making medicine for the clan, she'd never contacted him again. She was very clear that it'd be difficult for her to leave that secret room again if she went back. Her father doted on her not because she was his daughter, but because she was a genius pharmacist. He wouldn't hand her over to Medicine City's Council of Elders, nor would he offend all of Medicine City for her sake. Thus, he could only keep her trapped in the Mu clan. She hated being reduced to a tool. She hated days without freedom. Chi brother, where are you? If you don't show up soon, Ling will starve to death. Mu Ling sighed and decided to catch up on some sleep. She wouldn't feel hungry if she fell asleep, right? She also needed to save money to pay for her room. Some people couldn't sleep, while others stayed up all night. However, Han Yunqi slept all the way until dawn. The matter of the rainbow signal flare was left to Long Feiyi to investigate. She was still worried about her pill fiend pharmacy. Although Steward Luo was overseeing the reconstruction, there were still many things that she had to do personally. For example, the blueprint for the pharmacy, the pricing of the medicinal ingredients, the recruitment of pharmacists, apprentices, servants, and guards, the rules and regulations of Medicine Ghost Valley, and many other things. Just the blueprint alone was enough to give Han Yunqi a headache. It involved the appearance of the pharmacy, the storehouse, and so on. She had to carefully consider everything before starting work. After all, she didn't just want to store half of the ingredients. She wanted to store high-quality ones. The higher quality the ingredients, the more expensive they were. Thus, the requirements for the storage environment were very high. Han Yunqi had a lot of good medicinal ingredients on hand. She threw all of them into the detoxification system for automatic storage. She didn't need to think so much before, but now that she had to deal with so many things, she was a little overwhelmed. There were a few times when she was so tired that she thought of stealing all of Gu Qisha's medicinal ingredients into her detoxification system. However, it was just a thought. She originally wanted to find Gu Qisha to discuss it with her, but after thinking about it, she realized that he wasn't reliable. Unfortunately, she couldn't find Gu Beiwei and Mu Ling so she could only ask Gu Beiwei for help. Today was the day that Gu Beiwei came to the Han family's clinic in the eastern part of the city. Han Yunqi woke up early and went to the eastern part of the city to help out. 7th Madam, and Chun Xiang hadn't seen her for a long time and were chatting nonstop. Gu Beiwei, on the other hand, came in and bowed to her before getting busy. He saw more than 50 patients in one day. It was already dark and dinner was ready, but he still couldn't get away. Esteemed Wang Fei, Imperial Physician Gu will tire himself out. Tell him to stop, Madame Helian said seriously. Madame Helian was the Han family's 7th Madam, Helian Zuexiang. She was the only concubine in the Han family now. As grew older, everyone started calling her Madam. She lived up to the title of Madam. She didn't know how to manage things at first, but now she managed the entire Han family well and taught well. Han Yunqi looked at Gu Beiwei's calm and pale face and felt her heart ache. However, she knew that it was useless to try to persuade him. Gu Beiwei came to the clinic at a fixed time every month for consultations. Most of the difficult cases were waiting for him, so there were naturally many people waiting in line. If he didn't finish today, he would have to wait another month. As a physician, he knew very well what a month meant to a patient. Therefore, every time he came, he would see all the people in line. All Han Yunqi could do was tell the clinic to limit the number of people in line. Once Pill Fiend Pharmacy is built, it should be able to attract some famous physicians. When the time comes, Medicine Ghost Valley will provide medicine and let them come to the clinic for free, Han Yunqi said mildly. Hearing this, ears scooted over. Big sis, I want to take the medical school exam. I want to come back and help Big Brother Beiwei. After studying the Han family medical canon for over a year and receiving Gu Beiyue's guidance, Yi's medical skills were actually on par with the doctors in the clinic. Unfortunately, he didn't have the official qualifications to practice medicine, nor did he have a doctor's rank. So many patients didn't dare to seek treatment from him. When your big brother Beiyue has time, I'll have him test you first, Han Yunqi smiled. Big sis, big brother Beiyue is already a 5th-ranked divine doctor. When will he become a divine doctor? Yi asked seriously. Han Yunqi pinched his little ear and smiled. Big brother Beiyue doesn't care. Why not? Yi didn't understand. Han Yunqi was only joking, but Gu Beiyue overheard her as he walked over. He smiled mildly. It's not that he doesn't care. It's that he hasn't formed his own sect yet. Yi was about to continue asking, but Madame Helion stopped him. Children shouldn't keep asking questions. It's impolite. As she spoke, she quickly invited Han Yunqi and Gu Beiyue over. It was time for dinner. It was also on this day of the month that everyone put aside their various statuses and ate together without regard for seniority. After dinner, Han Yunqi handed the blueprints of Pill Fiend Pharmacy to Gu Beiyue. Imperial Physician Gu, help me take a look at where I need to change, especially the storeroom. Gu Beiyue looked over the blueprints carefully and made many suggestions. In the end, he said, Esteemed Wang Fei, if you want to expand your pharmacy, I'm afraid you won't be able to expand it with just the premium goods in Medicine Ghost Valley. You'll have to focus on the premium goods. Han Yunqi's heart grew quiet. How is Gu Beiyue so smart? He pointed out the problem she's been worrying about for the past few days with a single sentence. One of her goals for opening Pill Fiend Pharmacy was to sell premium medicinal ingredients, while the other was to expand its operations throughout Cloud Realm continent and gain a foothold in the medical community. Medicine Ghost Valley's premium medicinal ingredients were the high-end ones among the premium ones, while the ones that truly had a market were the low-end ones. These were all in the hands of Medicine City. Thus, once Pill Fiend Pharmacy opened, they'd have to face a problem of supply. Han Yunqi hesitated before saying, Pill Fiend Pharmacy is using Pill Fiend's name. I'm afraid Medicine City won't be willing to supply us with goods, right? Gu Beiyue smiled. Esteemed Wang Fei, there's someone who can help you. Who? Han Yunqi couldn't believe it. Even if Long Fei Yi and Wang Gong had a personal relationship, the Wang clan wouldn't help them so rashly. Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's president, Ouyang Ningnua, Gu Beiyue replied. Chapter 473. Ouyang Ningnua. As soon as Gu Beiyue mentioned the name, Han Yunqi almost forgot about him. When she first met him on Yuzhou Island, her first impression of him was that he was shameless. He had clearly colluded with Juni Xia on Fishery Island to take advantage of Tianning's famine to make a fortune. But when he saw Juni Xia trapped, he switched sides and boarded Long Fei Ye's ship to donate grain to Tianning's disaster areas. In any case, he was a man who placed profit above all else and had no moral integrity at all. Still, weren't all businessmen like that? To say nothing of a big businessman like Ouyang Ningnua. Although she didn't have a good impression of him, that didn't stop Han Yunqi from working with him. Han Yunqi knew that Ouyang Ningnua had a lot of face in Medicine City. The 3 great clans of Medicine City and a few other families of pharmacists were skilled in cultivating medicinal ingredients, but not in selling them. Most of them had to go through vendors to sell their wares to various parts of Cloud Realm continent, from the big markets to the small pharmacies. Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's vendors were the most powerful and had worked with all 3 of Medicine City's great clans to get their hands on most of the best-selling ingredients. Although Han Yunqi hadn't given the rights to any of the vendors yet, and was still in the hands of Medicine City's Council of Elders, she still had a sliver of hope if Ouyang Ningnua was willing to speak with them personally. We have to find a way to talk with him. Moreover, we can't make this matter public, Han Yunqi said seriously. It just so happens that the annual purchasing list for the Imperial pharmacies will be out in a few days. Ouyang Ningnua will make a personal trip, so this official is willing to act as a go-between for esteemed Wang Fei, Northmoon said. Han Yunqi was thrilled. Just like that, the matter was happily settled. After returning to the estate, Han Yunqi told Long Fei Yi about the matter, but Long Fei Yi only nodded without any objections. Han Yunqi then wrote a letter to Gu Qisha explaining the matter. After all, this business deal belonged to Pill Fiend Pharmacy, So Gu Qisha had the right to know. Gu Qisha immediately replied. He didn't have any objections either. However, just as Gu Beiwei was about to make an appointment with Ouyangning Nuo and Han Yunqi was about to begin her first business negotiation, both Long Fei Yi and Gu Qisha wanted to tag along. Han Yunqi, accompanied by Long Fei Yi, Gu Beiwei, and Gu Qisha, appeared in front of Ouyangning Nuo. Ouyangning Nuo was flabbergasted. He'd assumed that only Gu Beiwei and Han Yunqi would be present. He'd never imagined that a freak like Gu Qisha would show up, much less that the busy Duke of Qin. Despite his stupor, Ouyangning Nuo quickly regained his senses and stood up to bow. Although Juni Xie had hired assassins at a sky-high price to kill him, this matter did not affect him at all. Just like when they first met on Fishery Island, he was dressed in white and had an elegant demeanor. Your Highness Duke of Qin, esteemed Wang Fei, it's been a long time since we parted on Fishery Island. This humble one misses you. Lord Pilfiend, we haven't seen each other in more than 2 years. In front of these two important figures, Gu Beiwei, the head of the Imperial Academy of Medicine, was only a minor character. Ouyangning Nuo placed him at the back of the group, his attitude still friendly and courteous. Imperial Physician Gu, I trust you've been well since we last met? This guy, even in the face of an enemy, would still be so humble and courteous. Gu Beiwei hastily bowed. Thank you for your concern, President Ouyang. This humble one as well. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi clearly didn't like this and only nodded in response. As for Gu Qisha, he didn't even acknowledge Ouyangning Nuo. He'd already found a comfortable seat and sat down to drink tea. Ouyangning Nuo glanced at him but didn't make a fuss. He hurriedly invited everyone to take a seat. After Gu Beiwei briefly mentioned the matter of the premium medicinal ingredients, Han Yunqi spoke up. Since President Ouyang is sitting here today, I'm sure you're interested in this matter. You must also be confident in your ability to succeed, right? Ouyangning Nuo had been so polite and easy to talk to just a moment ago, but now he was frowning and looking like he was in a difficult position. Everyone present was smart enough to know that if this fellow was truly in a difficult position, he would have rejected them outright and wouldn't be sitting here. Before Han Yunqi could say anything, Long Fei Yi asked impatiently, What? You're not confident? It's not that I'm not confident. It's just that this matter isn't easy to handle. Ouyangning Nuo sighed. Long Fei Yi said, Whether it's easy or not is your own business. If you succeed, then there's a need for us to continue this discussion. If you can't, then all this talk is in vain. The corners of Han Yunqi's mouth twitched. She didn't know what to say. Your Highness Duke of Qin. Oh, Your Highness Duke of Qin. Although we're here to negotiate, we don't have any bargaining chips. In a sense, we're just asking for help. Is it really okay to be so domineering? Ouyangning Nuo had wanted to beat around the bush, but Long Fei Yi was right in front of him. He had no choice but to simplify things. Your Highness Duke of Qin, to tell you the truth, I've been eyeing premium medicinal ingredients for 2 to 3 years now. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to secure them. I'm here today to see if Your Highness and esteemed Wang Fei have any other options. Let's discuss them together. And if this prince says no? Long Fei Yi asked. If Ouyangning Nuo couldn't secure them, then how could they? Ouyangning Nuo's relationship with Medicine City's Wang clan hadn't been made public, so they didn't have any connections in Medicine City. Ouyangning Nuo clearly knew that they didn't have any, but he still came to negotiate. It was obvious that he had other motives. Ouyangning Nuo hesitated. If that's the case, then this matter really isn't going to work. Han Yunqi was still mulling over Ouyangning Nuo's attitude when Gu Qisha suddenly slammed his teacup on the table with a loud bang. Everyone turned to look at him in surprise. Gu Qisha was calm and composed as he lazily said, If you can't do it, then hurry up and leave. The tea here tastes terrible. Ouyangning Nuo was about to explain himself, but Long Fei Yi had already stood up and smoothed out Han Yunqi's bangs. Let's go. A trace of amusement flitted across Gu Beiwei's eyes, but he didn't say anything. Ouyangning Nuo's perpetual smile finally froze. He already had a plan in mind when Gu Beiwei brought it up, so he came to see Han Yunqi because he had a good plan. He'd originally planned to talk his way out of the matter and disappoint Han Yunqi. Then, he'd throw out an olive branch and have Han Yunqi beg him. Han Yunqi didn't have any bargaining chips in this matter. She was already 70% cooperating with him and 30% asking him for help. If he'd been able to convince her to help him, then Han Yunqi would have no choice but to let him name his terms. There would be no room for negotiation. How could he have known that this woman would bring Long Fei Yi and Gu Qixia along? He also didn't expect that this woman would only say one sentence from start to finish before the negotiation fell apart. Han Yunqi wasn't an idiot. She had already guessed that something was amiss. She reached out to grab Long Fei Yi's hand that was smoothing out her bangs and stood up as well. Yes, she had taken the initiative to hold Long Fei Yi's hand, and Long Fei Yi had allowed her to do so as well. This action was so natural that the two of them seemed to have gotten used to it. Gu Qixia and Gu Beiwei both saw this. One stared fixedly at them, while the other looked away with a faint smile on his face. Gu Qixia stood up as well. Gu Beiwei naturally didn't want to sit and followed suit. At this point, Ouyangning Nuo couldn't hold himself back any longer. Duke of Qin, this one has an idea. I wonder if you dare to take it. Let's hear it. Long Fei Yi remained unperturbed. Ouyangning Nuo lowered his voice. Sky Domain Black Market. Han Yunqi was puzzled. I want low-grade, high-quality medicinal ingredients. Why would Sky Domain Black Market have them? Most of the high-quality medicinal ingredients in the black market were sold by people in Medicine City. There weren't many of them, and most of them were high-quality ingredients. The black market doesn't have them, but the people in the black market have a good idea. Ouyangning Nuo's smile finally revealed a sly glint. Han Yunqi still didn't understand. Long Fei Yi sneered. Ouyangning Nu, are you saying that we should just go straight to the black market and not ask you for help? Gu Qixia was clearly trying to undermine him, but Ouyangning Nuo was a good-natured man. He smiled and said, It's not that easy to find a way to the black market. Who would be willing to pull strings for you and ruin their own business for no good reason? So, before Long Fei Yi could finish, Gu Qixia flared up. So, what are you trying to say with all this bullshit? Long Fei Yi didn't say anything. Han Yunqi and Gu Beiwei also fell silent. Ouyangning Nuo suddenly felt awkward. He cleared his throat and said, Sit. Everyone, please sit down. This matter needs to be discussed slowly. However, no one sat down. Ouyangning Nuo had been through no less than 100 major negotiations ever since he'd taken charge, but this was the first time he'd lost control of the situation and the initiative. What could he do if no one sat down? He had no choice but to put it bluntly. There are two bosses in Sky Domain Black Market who split all of its businesses equally. One of them is called Zhangsun Zilan, and he's a meticulous demon. All of Sky Domain Black Market's business is under his control. He works with the young masters of Medicine City's 3 great clans all year round to inflate the prices of medicinal ingredients and swindle buyers. If we can take him down, we'll have something to use against the 3 great clans. Then we won't have to worry about not having enough bargaining chips to negotiate with them. Han Yunqi laughed. So, your so-called path is to use underhanded means to take advantage of underhanded means. The 3 big medicine families were all big families. Although they had a lot of people and a lot of businesses, the ones who were able to sell top-grade medicines in the Qingyun realm's black market had to be the young masters of their families with extremely high social status. In fact, the clan lords would tacitly approve of their actions. After all, the profits from such a business were simply too high. Once this matter was exposed, it would greatly affect the reputation of the 3 great clans. Thus, if they could get their hands on evidence, they could use it to blackmail Medicine City into selling low-quality medicinal ingredients. In short, Ouyangning Nuo's intention was to blackmail Medicine City instead of negotiating with them. Esteemed Wang Fei, please don't make it sound so unpleasant. Aren't we doing this for the sake of the patients? As long as the goal is noble, so what if the process is a little despicable? Ouyangning Nuo chuckled. So, you're willing to volunteer? Long Fei Yi asked with raised brows. As long as your Highness Duke of Qin can take down Zhangsun Zilan, I won't take a single cent of Pill Fiend Pharmacy's business with Medicine City, Ouyangning Nuo earnestly declared. Who's the other boss of Sky Domain Black Market? Long Fei Yi asked. This one doesn't know. I'm only interested in Zhangsun Zealand's businesses. Ouyang Ning Nua smiled. At this point, Ouyang Ning Nua's true goal was finally revealed. Han Yunqi thought, if it weren't for Long Fei Yi and Gu Qisha's stubbornness, who knows what kind of trap this guy would have set for me. Chapter 474. Not even 10%? Han Yunqi only laughed coldly in her heart. Ouyang Ning Nua was speaking so generously, but Zhangsun Zealand's businesses were worth much more than medicinal ingredients. This fellow had swallowed up many large businesses over the years, so without a doubt, he was planning to loot a burning house this time by swallowing up half of Sky Domain Black Market. Such wild ambitions, no wonder he was the boss of Cloud Realm Trade Consortium. But why was he so sure that Long Fei Yi could take down Zhangsun Zealand? Long Fei Yi was very interested as well. How will your lordship take down Zhangsun Zealand? Ouyang Ning Nua didn't continue, but smiled. If your highness agrees, we'll write it down in black and white. It won't be too late for me to tell you then. As expected of a businessman, he's shrewd and cautious. Long Fei Yi wasn't a businessman, but he didn't lose to Ouyang Ning Nua. He sat back down and asked, how do you plan to write it down in black and white? Ouyang Ning Nua grew serious. This one will help your highness get rid of Zhangsun Zealand and facilitate the cooperation between Medicine City and Pill Fiend Pharmacy. Will your highness not interfere with any of Zhangsun Zealand's businesses as well? Han Yunqi was still thinking when Long Fei Yi agreed without a second thought. All right. As if guessing Han Yunqi's unease, Long Fei Yi gave her a reassuring look. Han Yunqi smiled. It's the most comfortable to discuss matters with His Highness. He's straightforward and direct. Han Yunqi was mocking Ouyang Ning Nua for being sloppy, but everyone else noticed the words His Highness. Even Long Fei Yi looked at her in surprise. Han Yunqi had blurted it out so quickly that she didn't realize what she just said. Gu Beiyue's eyes were filled with unhappiness and dark clouds. Gu Beiyue was like an invisible man as he drank his tea with his head bowed. Ouyang Ning Nua was the most confused of all. He remembered that Han Yunqi had even revealed the chastity mark on her arm the last time they were on Fishery Island. This couple was clearly only in name, but not in reality. How long had it been since they last met? Why were they so lovey-dovey? Just now, Long Fei Yi rubbed Han Yunqi's hair, and Han Yunqi held his hand. Now, they were actually showing off their love so directly? Seeing everyone's strange gazes, Han Yunqi also felt strange. She looked at Long Fei Yi in confusion. Long Fei Yi didn't say anything. He rubbed her bangs again. His gentle movements were filled with affection, and her dazed eyes were filled with innocence. This moment was peaceful and beautiful. Finally, Gu Qisha couldn't take it anymore and shouted towards the door. Waiter, bring me the brush, ink, paper, and inkstone. Ouyang Ning Nua regained his composure, but Long Fei Yi didn't let go of her hair. Han Yunqi liked the gentleness of his large hands, so she allowed him to rub her hair. Gu Qisha's eyes flashed with hatred. Long Fei Yi, you'd better not fall into my hands one day. Long Fei Yi's straightforwardness made Ouyang Ning Nua uneasy. However, he'd already thought about this condition, and there weren't any loopholes. After the brush, ink, paper, and inkstone were presented, Long Fei Yi and Ouyang Ning Nua signed the agreement on the spot. After Long Fei Yi stamped the agreement, he casually handed it to Han Yunqi for safekeeping. He asked coldly, Ouyang Ning Nua, can you continue now? Ouyang Ning Nua smiled mysteriously as he slowly poured Long Fei Yi a cup of tea. Your Highness Duke of Qin, you won't lose out on this deal. This humble one has received reliable information that Zhangsun Zealand obtained a large batch of. Here, Ouyang Ning Nua lowered his voice to a whisper. Gunpowder. Gunpowder. Long Fei Yi's eyes flashed with astonishment, while Han Yunqi and the rest were stunned as well. After all, gunpowder could cause terrifying amounts of destruction in large quantities. All of Cloud Realm Continent's nations had strict control over gunpowder. All gunpowder factories were controlled by the military. Even the firecrackers used by civilians were limited in quantity by the military. Yet Zhangsun Zealand had a large batch of gunpowder, and it was all in Sky Domain Black Market. Sky Domain Black Market wasn't far from Tianning's capital. In the silence of the room, Ouyang Ning Nua was smiling faintly. He knew that the bargaining chip in his hands held a lot of weight. Where did Zhang Sun Zilin get his hands on such a large batch of gunpowder? And who was he planning to sell it to? Han Yunqi muttered to herself, but she quickly realized that something was off. Zhang Sun Zilin isn't selling this batch of gunpowder. Someone is using him to secretly transport the gunpowder to Tianning through the black market, and they're trying to get close to the capital. No wonder you're esteemed Wang Fei. You're so smart, Ouyang Ningnua praised. Who is it? Han Yunqi asked. Without a doubt, this person's motives were frightening. Ouyang Ningnua wanted to keep her in suspense, but Long Fei only replied coldly, the Chu clan. His Highness Duke of Qin is even smarter. Hee. Ouyang Ningnua silently admired him. The Duke of Qin didn't seem to involve himself in the affairs of the imperial court or political factions, but he knew everything about Tianning's imperial court like the back of his hand. No one would have guessed Long Fei's motives if he didn't say it out loud, but they weren't surprised when he did. In all three of Cloud Realm Continent's nations, gunpowder was controlled by the military. Tianning's three armies, General Mu's estate, the Bailey army, and the Ning clan troops stationed at the borders would never take such a huge risk to send gunpowder to Sky Domain Black Market. Between Northern Li and Western Zhou, Western Zhou's Chu clan was the most suspicious. Western Zhou's Chu clan was part of the military to begin with. Moreover, Chu Qingge had only recently arrived for a political marriage. She represented the Chu clan and coveted the throne. General Mu's estate not only controlled Tianning's foot soldiers, but young General Mu Qingwu also controlled the 100,000 imperial guards in the capital. It could be said that Mu Qingwu held all of Tianning's peace in his hands. Moreover, Mu Qingwu was already part of the Crown Prince's faction. If anything happened to Emperor Tianhui in the future, the various factions vying for the throne would start a coup d'état and take control of the capital. Naturally, Chu Qingge had to hold back a trick or two. Only she could come up with the idea of stockpiling gunpowder in the black market. Of course, both Long Fei and Han Yunqi could guess that Chu Qingge's brain couldn't have come up with such a plan. It looked like the Chu clan had made all sorts of arrangements for Chu Qingge's political marriage. Han Yunqi suddenly recalled Su Xiaoyu's affairs. She wondered if Long Fei had found out anything recently, but it wasn't appropriate to ask in front of outsiders. Your Highness Duke of Qin, this one's information is quite valuable, isn't it? Ouyang Ningnua smiled. Long Fei nodded generously. It really is worth a lot of money. The powers of the black market were complex and involved a wide range of people. The imperial court had always tacitly approved of its existence and didn't want to come into direct conflict with it. But Emperor Tianhui wouldn't tolerate a secret stash of gunpowder that threatened the safety of the capital no matter how wide the implications were. He wouldn't leave the matter at that. Things were settled just like that. Ouyang Ningnua's information couldn't be false. Han Yunqi and the rest were just lacking proof. After returning, Han Yunqi and Long Fei immediately prepared to head for Sky Domain Black Market. But before they left, they saw Gu Qisha sitting by the gates of the Duke of Qin's estate. Aren't you going to leave? Han Yunqi asked in bewilderment. Everyone had dispersed after leaving the tea house, so she assumed he'd gone back to Medicine Ghost Valley. Before Gu Qisha could answer, Long Fei pulled Han Yunqi onto the carriage. Gu Qisha mounted the horse and said, "This old man owns half of Pill Fiend Pharmacy, so of course I have to take care of its business." Did Han Yunqi gain or lose by taking half of Medicine Ghost Valley? Long Fei's eyes flickered with displeasure, but he didn't say a word. Ever since their last trip to Medicine Ghost Valley, he'd grown more tolerant of Gu Qisha. Han Yunqi could tell, but she still didn't understand this man. Whenever he became tolerant of someone or something, it meant he was plotting something. Of course, she was an exception. Just like that, Gu Qisha chased after Long Fei and Han Yunqi's carriage out of the city. After passing through the fields outside the city, the carriage had just entered the forest when the sounds of an intense battle could be heard. When it came to meddling in other people's business, Long Fei and Gu Qisha had something in common. Neither of them liked to meddle in other people's business, so even though the sound of battle was very close, they pretended not to hear it and continued forward. But who knew that not long after, a clear voice would ring out from behind them. "You 5 big men are bullying a weak woman like me. Aren't you ashamed?" If you have the ability, come one by one and fight me one-on-one. Han Yunqi was alarmed. Stop the carriage. Stop the carriage. Gu Qisha also stopped his horse and turned around to look. He saw a petite figure roll out of the forest and onto the road, followed by 5 burly men. Each of them held a large saber in their hands, and they were dressed like bandits. They quickly surrounded the woman, and one of them laughed lecherously. One by one. All right, brothers, who's going to take her first? Pay. Disgusting. The woman spat saliva all over the burly man's face. The burly man angrily swung his saber at her, and the other 4 men followed suit. Although the 5 brothers looked burly, their movements were not clumsy at all. Their sabers were not slashing randomly either, but they had their own set of moves. It was obvious that their martial arts were not bad. The woman also knew some martial arts, but she was no match for the 5 of them at once. After a few moves, she could only dodge and did not even have the chance to take the initiative to attack. Soon, the encirclement became smaller and smaller, and the woman had nowhere to run. On the other side, Long Fei Yi sat in his carriage and lifted the curtain, watching with a cold face. Gu Qisha was still sitting on his horse, watching from the sidelines. Only Han Yunqi was anxious, very anxious. This was because the woman was none other than Mu Ling. Your Highness, swords have no eyes. Hurry up and save her. Han Yunqi anxiously tugged at Long Fei Yi's sleeve. Long Fei Yi only had 2 impressions of Mu Ling. The first was when she pushed Han Yunqi in the heaven pit, and the second was when she stopped the carriage and scolded Han Yunqi. He really did not want to save her. Seeing Han Yunqi's anxious expression, Gu Qisha was amused. Little girl, say something nice to me, and I'll go save her. How about it? Han Yunqi rolled her eyes at him. Just as she was about to continue begging Long Fei Yi, Mu Ling, who was not far away, had been cornered and was paralyzed on the ground. Han Yunqi was quick-witted. Only then did she remember that she had hidden weapons. She immediately activated her Pear Blossom Teardrop Rain and shot out several golden needles, all of which hit the bandits' vital points. Seeing the bandits fall one by one, Mu Ling hurriedly dodged the falling sabers. Only then did she notice that there were people around her, and she looked over suspiciously. Han Yunqi? She was surprised, but at the same time, she saw Gu Qisha standing beside her. Han Yunqi's face was full of disdain. Coldly she said, "So it's you. If I'd known earlier, I wouldn't have saved her." She immediately got into the carriage. She did not know the relationship between her and Mu Ling, but she could not leave her in the lurch. Chapter 475. Mu Ling had been embarrassed that Han Yunqi had saved her. Now that she heard Han Yunqi's words, she flew into a rage out of humiliation. Who told you to save her? Meddling in other people's business. Han Yunqi had more important matters to attend to, so she couldn't be bothered to argue with her. But Mu Ling once again blocked the carriage's path and refused to let them go. Gu Qisha silently picked up the hidden dart in his hand and began to play with his bony fingers. He didn't seem to be in a rush to leave either. But Long Fei Yi's patience was limited. He ordered the driver in a low voice, "Why aren't you leaving yet?" His angry voice was loud enough for Mu Ling to hear. She had always feared Long Fei Yi from the bottom of her heart, so she grew anxious. "Wait a minute, Han Yunqi. I only want to ask you one thing. I'll say it one last time. We weren't the ones who imprisoned Mute Granny." Han Yunqi grew angry as well. Mu Ling stared at her for a long time before saying faintly, "Do you know where my Chi brother is?" She couldn't even afford to pay for her room, so she came to the mountains to pick medicinal herbs. She hoped that she could find some herbs to exchange for some money at the medicine hall. Who would have thought that not only would she not find any valuable herbs, but she would also encounter some bandits. Although there were wild medicinal ingredients everywhere, they weren't worth much. A whole basket of them wasn't even enough to pay for half a day's rent. After all, the inn she was staying at was the most expensive in Tianning's capital city. Leaving aside the silver, her father had sent her 2 letters yesterday and the day before yesterday, both urging her to go home. His attitude was much tougher than before. If Chi brother still didn't show up, she wouldn't know what to do. She had steeled her heart to run away from home and wander the world, but the person who was supposed to accompany her still hadn't shown up. When Han Yunxi saw the disappointment in Mu Ling-er's eyes, she felt a pang of heartache. She even wondered if her brain had gone haywire. Why was she suddenly feeling sorry for this naughty girl who'd pushed her and cursed her? Well, she was also looking for Gu. Only the heavens knew where that demon had run off to. Your Chi brother is not familiar with me. You asked the wrong person, Han Yunxi said angrily. Gu Qisha's fingers stiffened when he heard this, but he quickly regained his composure and turned his head away, pretending that he hadn't heard anything. Mu Ling-er was angry. Chi brother is so good to you, and you say you don't know him well. How can you do this? Han Yunxi felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't dare to imagine Long Fei Ye's expression. This stinky girl was simply looking for trouble with Gu. Gu Qishao had treated her rather well, but not as well as Mu Linger's so-called good. He'd been flippant as soon as they met and spouted frivolous lies. Leaving aside a married woman like her, he couldn't even treat an unmarried woman like this. I really don't know him well, and I don't know where he is. Get out of my way. Han Yunxi said bluntly. Mu Ling-er suddenly wanted to tell Han Yunxi that Chi brother was the one who first became suspicious about Mute Granny. However, she felt that it was inappropriate and could only helplessly back away. Han Yunxi was about to return to the carriage when she suddenly stopped and said provocatively, Mu Ling-er, I heard that you are the most talented pharmacist in the history of Medicine City. Do you dare to challenge my pill fiend pharmacy? Challenge? Inside the carriage, Long Fei and Gu Qisha were both puzzled. What's the challenge? However, Mu Ling-er's main point was the word dare. Her biggest weakness was that she couldn't stand being provoked. What do you want to challenge? Just say it, she proudly replied. Han Yunxi was secretly delighted. She originally wanted to find Gu to persuade this girl to come to Pill Fiend Pharmacy, but it seemed that today's situation was better than waiting for Gu to come knocking on her door. She might as well find Mu Ling-er herself. If she had directly brought this up with Mu Ling-er, the girl might have rejected her and even insulted her. However, the result would be different if she provoked her. Han Yunxi pretended to be disdainful. Your skills are only SOSO, but your tone is quite big. Mu Ling-er immediately became angry. Han Yunxi, you just want me to challenge you. You haven't even seen me make medicine, so what right do you have to judge me so casually? Mu Ling-er wasn't arrogant, but she hated this kind of slander. All right. Then on the next opening day of Pill Fiend Pharmacy, come and challenge His Excellency Pill Fiend and let me see. Everyone present was stunned by Han Yunxi's words, but she continued with a smile. If you win, you can name any conditions you want. If you lose, haha, you can name any conditions you want. In any case, I just want to see it for myself. What? You want me to challenge His Excellency Pill Fiend? Mu Ling-er finally caught the crux of the matter. Inside the carriage, Long Fei Ye's lips curled into a beautiful smile, but Gu Qisha couldn't help but snicker. Han Yunxi, oh Han Yunxi, you really are the worst. Mu Ling-er was a genius pharmacist in Medicine City. Her talent was extraordinary, and her future was limitless. However, she couldn't be compared to Gu Qisha. If it weren't for the fact that Gu Qisha was expelled from Medical City and had a bad reputation for hoarding medicine and not selling it, he would have been revered as a grandmaster long ago. Yes, I want to challenge His Excellency Pill Fiend. Han Yunxi was quite serious. Mu Ling-er was about to speak when Gu Qisha laughed even louder. Haha, you have guts. This daddy likes it. Girl, up until now, aside from Han Yunxi, no one has dared to challenge this daddy. You're the only one. Mu Ling-er wanted to cry, but no tears came out. How did things turn out like this? No matter how arrogant she was, she still wouldn't dare to challenge His Excellency Pill Fiend. If news of this got out, no one would admire her courage. They would only laugh at her for overestimating herself. Seeing Mu Ling-er's awkward expression, Han Yunxi's lips curled into a mocking smile. His Excellency Pill Fiend, I think we should just forget about it. This joke has gone too far. Joke? This daddy thinks she's serious. Humph, how boring. Gu Qisha was even more disdainful. The words grated on Mu Linger's ears. She didn't know where she found the courage to agree. All right, I'll definitely go. Losing wasn't shameful, but not daring to go was the most shameful thing. All right, we'll wait. Han Yunqi was overjoyed. Mu Ling was finally willing to open the way. Only after Han Yunqi had entered the carriage did she say, Han Yunqi, if you see Chi brother, please pass a message to him. Tell him that I'm looking for him. Han Yunqi originally didn't plan to reply, but in the end, she couldn't bear to and replied, all right. She sighed inwardly. She didn't know if Mu Ling falling for Gu was a blessing or a curse. Was it fate or a debt? Was it right or wrong? When it came to feelings, everyone was willing. How could there be such a thing as right or wrong? The carriage gradually moved further and further away, gradually picking up speed. Long Fei picked up the scroll again. However, not long after, he asked, I heard from the hidden guards that Gu came to the residence to look for you? Han Yunqi was shocked. Sure enough, nothing in the residence could escape this guy's eyes. Yes, he's a guest, she admitted honestly. Unexpectedly, Long Fei didn't get angry. He asked again, why did he look for you? Han Yunqi was puzzled. Long Fei had previously warned that if he saw her hanging out with Gu again, he would break Gu's legs. Judging from the current situation, this guy seemed to have forgotten what he said. Still, she's hanging out with Gu Qixiao, and Gu Qixiao's a guest were two different things. They couldn't be lumped together. Han Yunqi was wishful thinking on her part. Long Fei was probably quite reasonable in this regard. Thus, she answered honestly, send something. Although Long Fei didn't get angry, he kept asking questions. What is it? Han Yunqi smiled. It's a lobster. That guy probably went to Yuzhou Island too. Did you accept it? No. Han Yunqi actually wanted to say that her stomach still twitched when she heard about lobster. That's it? He also sent a can of tea leaves, Red South Mountain. Is it authentic? I don't know. Heavenly Fragrance Tea House has been closed for almost 2 years. Where did he get Red South Mountain? He has tea seeds. He said he planted them somewhere else. Long Fei nodded thoughtfully and asked again, why did he send you lobster and tea leaves for no reason? According to Gu, the lobster was to nourish her body. As for the tea leaves, it was purely a misunderstanding. How should Han Yunqi answer this question? One who is unaccountably solicitous is hiding evil intentions. It turns out that he has something to ask of your highness, so he came to curry favor with me. I didn't accept the lobster and Red South Mountain. Han Yunqi was obviously saying nice things and saying careless words, but she knew clearly in her heart. After all, she was a woman. She still had the sensitivity that a woman should have. Therefore, she always rejected Gu and never accepted anything that Gu gave her. Long Fei looked at Han Yunqi. His eyes were as dark as midnight, as if he could see through her. Han Yunqi really didn't like to discuss this with Long Fei. It was awkward and awkward no matter how she said it. Fortunately, Long Fei didn't ask any more questions. He stretched out his big hand and pulled Han Yunqi into his arms. Holding her, he continued to read his book. Han Yunqi decided to sleep. When they arrived at the black market, who knew if she would still be able to sleep? Not long after, dark clouds gathered in the sky. Thunder rumbled and the wind blew, followed by rain. No matter how fast the four-wheeled carriage traveled, it was still very stable. Han Yunqi snuggled up in Long Fei's arms. Surrounded by his unique scent and sense of security, she slept very soundly. Let alone a storm, even if the sky collapsed, she wouldn't be disturbed. Long Fei's gaze had unknowingly shifted from his book to Han Yunqi's face. He silently looked at her for a while before unconsciously putting down his book. He gently lifted her scattered hair and carefully tucked her bangs away, then quietly planted a kiss on her forehead. Inside the carriage, it was quiet and warm. Outside, the wind and rain were getting heavier. Gu Qixiao, who was chasing after them on horseback, had long been drenched. He and his horse were both faster than Long Fei's carriage. Moreover, he could find a place to hide from the rain and chase after Long Fei after the rain passed. It wasn't as if he didn't know the way to the black market. However, he didn't speed up or change his route. He continued to follow behind the carriage, allowing the rain to soak him thoroughly. The rain became heavier and heavier. The distant figure seemed to be washed away by the rain and gradually became blurry. However, No matter how heavy the rain was, it could never wash away the stubbornness and persistence of that figure. After the rain stopped, it was already late at night. Han Yunxi groggily woke up and glanced at Long Feiyi. Seeing that he was leaning against a high pillow, she didn't dare to move. However, Long Feiyi sensed that she was awake. He glanced at her and changed his position to make her more comfortable before closing his eyes and continuing to sleep. Is this how it feels to sleep together? Han Yunxi suddenly wished that the sky would never brighten. Of course, the sky would eventually brighten. After that, they would arrive at the black market. Note to readers, follow the official WeChat account. There are wonderful book reviews every day. WeChat ID, Tienkaksia Dufi. Chapter 476. They'd arrived at the black market. How was Long Feiyi planning to deal with Zhang Sunzilan? The three of them entered the black market and stopped at Wu Shu's grain store. When the informants of the Wu clan saw Han Yunxi, they all gathered around to take a look. After all, Long Feiyi's subordinates in the black market had all admired and worshipped their mistress ever since the incident at the imperial uncle's estate. How they hoped that one day, their mistress would come to the black market and lead them to do something big. With their mistress's ability to trick people, they would definitely become a big force in the black market of the Tianyu domain within a year and a half. Of course, when they reached the backyard, this group of people consciously stopped and didn't dare to follow them in. Only Uncle Wu followed. As soon as Long Feiyi sat down, Wu Shu presented him with a stack of documents. It detailed all of Zhang Sunzilan's businesses in the black market, including his stores, warehouses, and residences. Han Yunxi was secretly alarmed. She never expected that Long Feiyi's men in the black market would be able to dig up so much information as soon as Ouyang Ningnua gave them the information. Most likely, this fellow knew more about the black market than they'd imagined. Long Feiyi looked at the documents intently, but Gu Qisha couldn't sit still. Long Feiyi, what are your plans? Tell this old man. Long Feiyi ignored him, but Han Yunxi wanted to ask him the same question. Although she'd come with Long Feiyi, she wasn't sure how he was going to deal with Zhang Sunzilan. Ouyang Ningnua had given them enough clues, but this wasn't an easy task. If evidence of Medicine City and Zhang Sunzilan's collusion reached the hands of others, it would be a blow to Medicine City's reputation and Zhang Sunzilan's reputation. As long as this matter was made public, Zhang Sunzilan's businesses would be ruined. Who would dare to do business with someone who would betray their partners? Thus, there was only one way to force Zhang Sunzilan to hand over the evidence. That was to threaten him with evidence of smuggling gunpowder. Here was the crux of the matter. The matter of gunpowder was 100 times more serious than the matter of medicinal ingredients. This was an enemy of Tianning's imperial clan. Zhang Sunzilan definitely would not easily leave behind any evidence that could be used against him. Even if they found it, Zhang Sunzilan might not admit it. After all, this was a black market. They couldn't possibly bring a large group of soldiers here to search, could they? Moreover, if the Long Feiyi wanted to use this chance to get rid of Chu Qingge as the Empress candidate, he couldn't beat the grass and startle the snake. He'd have to find some evidence to present to Emperor Tianhui first. Han Yunxi carefully considered the matter. The more she thought, the more she felt that they shouldn't have come to the black market so early. Perhaps it'd be easier to start with Chu Qingge instead. After Long Feiyi finished reading the information, he casually tossed it to Gu Qisha. Take a look and see which of these places are most likely to hide gunpowder. What are you trying to do? Gu Qisha asked in confusion. Look for gunpowder, Long Feiyi said. Han Yunxi and Gu Qisha were both surprised and asked in unison. And then, let's talk after we find him. Long Feiyi said indifferently. That's the stupidest way to do it. Even if you find him, Zhang Sunzilan won't admit it. Gu Qisha said, before adding kindly, moreover, you'll lose a good chance to deal with the Chu clan. How about we make a bet? Long Feiyi asked with interest. What are we betting on? Gu Qisha was interested as well. Let's bet on Zhang Sunzilan, Long Feiyi said. And the stakes? Gu Qisha asked next. If your lordship wins, all the medicinal ingredients in your courtyard will go to Han Yunxi. If your lordship loses, you can do whatever you want. Han Yunqi couldn't help but laugh at Long Fei Ye's words. But Gu Qi only chuckled and said, I'm not betting. Gu Qi wasn't as easy to goad as Mu Ling nor was he as stupid as Mu Ling He didn't know anything about the black markets, so he wouldn't bet against Long Fei Ye just for the sake of winning. Why would this guy take the initiative to make a bet if he wasn't completely confident? Han Yunqi chuckled. Long Fei Ye's lips curled into a sneer, but Gu Qi continued to hum a strange tune as he flipped through the documents. He looked like he wasn't paying much attention, but after a while, he was still able to accurately pick out a few suitable places to hide gunpowder. He asked suspiciously, Long Fei Yi, are you planning to investigate them one by one? Do you have a better idea? Long Fei Yi asked. Gu Qi didn't need to think about it, because even if he did, he didn't have one. He stood up and stretched lazily. Take your time, then. I'm going to catch up on some sleep. Where's the best room you have? Half of Pill Fiend Pharmacy belongs to you. If you want to stand by and do nothing, turn right when you leave. I won't be seeing you out. Long Fei Yi said. Turning right was the way to leave the black market. Gu Qi shrugged resentfully. Fine. I'll look for them one by one with you. That should be fine, right? Han Yunqi didn't understand. Long Fei Yi had always been a loner and was straightforward in his dealings. This time, however, he seemed to be deliberately dragging Gu Qi into this. Could this guy have some other motive? The matter with Pill Fiend Pharmacy has already been settled, so what other motive could he have? Han Yunqi couldn't figure it out, so she remained silent. She was about to follow him when Long Fei Yi told her to stay in the grain store. Your Highness, Han Yunqi panicked. You won't be able to help with the secret investigation, Long Fei Yi said indifferently. Girl, he's saying that you'll only be a burden if you go. You don't even know how to climb over a wall, right? Gu Qi laughed. Han Yunqi glared fiercely at him. Gu Qi was amused. If that's not what he meant, then what is he trying to say? Han Yunqi was furious, but she couldn't refute him. Long Fei Yi and Gu Qi were going on a secret investigation. Bringing her along would indeed be very troublesome. She knew her place very well. Your Highness, I'll be waiting for your good news. Long Fei Yi lovingly stroked her bangs and gently said, Be good. You don't have to climb over a wall. Go and rest. The dark clouds in Han Yunqi's eyes dissipated. So there's only a difference between disdain and pampering. So what if I don't know martial arts? As long as I have someone to protect me. Seeing Gu Qi staring at her, Han Yunqi purposely stretched her back lazily. Her languid and leisurely posture was enough to make anyone who couldn't sleep envious and jealous. After a sleepless night, Gu Qi's eyes were filled with doting love. He wanted nothing more than for this girl to eat and sleep well and grow fat. How could he really let her be a burden? Just like that, Long Fei Yi and Gu Qi left the house, leaving Han Yunqi alone at the Wu clan's grain store. Her laziness was nothing more than an act. As soon as Long Fei Yi and Gu Qi left, she carefully flipped through the documents and wondered if there was anything she could do to help. At this moment, a rustling sound came from her wide sleeves. What's that? Han Yunqi quickly grabbed it. Cheap. Lil Thing immediately shrieked. Mama Yunqi, you can't do this. You're squeezing my insides out. Han Yunqi pulled Lil Thing out and dangled it in the air. When did you follow us here? I thought you weren't coming back. Lil Thing ran to Gu Beiyue's place every 2 to 3 days. Most of the time, it wouldn't show up for days, so she'd almost forgotten she had such a poison beast. Lil Thing had no idea what Han Yunqi was talking about. It waved its paws wildly as it tried to act cute. It only hoped that Mama Yunqi would put it down quickly. But Han Yunqi didn't let it go. Instead, she looked at it with interest, her smile growing wider and wider. She'd thought of a good idea. Lil Thing, I'll give you a chance to curry favor with His Highness Duke of Qin. Do you want it? Han Yunqi asked seriously. Cheap, cheap? Lil Thing replied seriously as well. Actually, it had no idea what Mama Yunqi was talking about. Han Yunqi quickly took out a medicine from her medical pouch. Sulfur. That's right. Sulfur was a chemical substance that could be used to make medicine or poison. Most importantly, sulfur was an important component of gunpowder. As soon as she took it out, Lil Thing covered its mouth with its paws. So smelly. Seeing this, Han Yunxi was amused. She placed the sulfur in front of Lil Thing and said, "Take a good sniff. Gunpowder has this smell as well." Lil Thing wasn't half an animal. Although it couldn't understand human speech, it was very perceptive. Seeing Han Yunxi's actions, it immediately understood that Mama Yunxi wanted it to find something by smelling. Its nose was even sharper than a canine's. Any poison within a 1 li radius wouldn't be able to escape its nose. As for this kind of extremely pungent smell, it was confident that it could find it. The little thing grabbed the small piece of sulfur and sniffed it seriously. It didn't know why, but the more it sniffed, the less smelly it felt. It was even a little addicted and almost ate the sulfur. Fortunately, Han Yunxi stopped it in time. "You're looking to die." Sulfur wasn't medicine or poison on its own. It had to be mixed with other things to create both effects. Heaven knows what the consequences would be if it ate it alone. Lil Thing gave an aggrieved squeak. It wasn't a glutton, but it hadn't eaten anything good in ages. Recently, it had given all the nourishing medicines it found to Imperial Physician Gu. As for poisons, Mama Yunxi's weren't to its liking. Its body hadn't recovered yet, and its blood hadn't recovered its detoxification properties yet. Lil Thing let go of the sulfur and scuttled to the windowsill. It didn't run out immediately, but stared unblinkingly at Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi saw through it at a glance. Without a choice, she took out an extremely rare poison from her medical pouch. "Here, be a picky eater." As soon as Lil Thing smelled the delicious food, it pounced on it and wolfed it down. It knew Mama Yunxi was hiding something good. How could it not loot a burning house? Seeing Lil Thing eat like this, Han Yunxi was both angry and amused. She couldn't bear to take out another rare poison. "Here, eat until you're full. The black market's huge. There'll be plenty for you to run around." Lil Thing turned around and opened its mouth wide, swallowing the poison in one gulp. If she wasn't hallucinating, then Lil Thing's mouth had been wider than its body. Frightened, Han Yunxi looked at her hand to make sure it was still there before she relaxed. The little thing grinned at her and quickly flew out of the window to look for the smell of sulfur. Naturally, Han Yunxi wouldn't follow it. Even if she wanted to, she didn't have the strength. She'd long seen Lil Thing's speed for herself. She could only sit there and wait with a clear conscience. She wasn't sure if Long Fei Yi and Gu Qisha would find the gunpowder first, or if Lil Thing would come back to give her a surprise. If someone made a bet with her this time, she wasn't sure she'd win. But what would the result be? Chapter 477. In less than half a day, Long Fei Yi and Gu Qisha had scoured the warehouses behind several large markets. Unfortunately, they couldn't even smell the slightest bit of gunpowder, let alone find a large quantity of it. The two of them hadn't spoken a word since they left the Wu family's grain store. They traveled together for the entire journey, but when they reached a warehouse, they split up and left at the same time. Neither of them spoke a word as they both knew that the other had not found anything. At this time, they had snuck into another large warehouse and were in the same room. They split up to search for the secret rooms. After spending a lot of time, they still found nothing. The two of them looked at each other, then tacitly left. Gu Qisha leaped onto the wall as soon as he left. Long Fei Ye's martial arts were far superior to his, but he was always one step slower. Along the way, Long Fei Yi kept an eye on Gu Qisha's movements. He observed his qinggong, the strength of his legs, and the way he leaped onto roofs and vaulted over walls. He had sparred with Gu Qisha a few times before, but he hadn't paid much attention to his movements. Now, however, he was especially attentive. After observing carefully, Long Fei Yi leaped into the air and landed on the roof. "Cold," he said. "The next warehouse is this way. Let's split up. Otherwise, we won't find anything even if we search for 3 days and 3 nights." Gu Qisha replied unhappily. In reality, he hadn't planned to search seriously when he came out with Long Fei Yi. The reason why he hadn't suggested splitting up from the start was because he wanted to slack off with Long Fei Yi. After all, he didn't need to worry about anything else as long as he followed him. But now, he realized that foolishly following him was tiring. He decided to sneak back to catch up on some sleep. If he couldn't fall asleep, He could still drink tea and chat with Han Yunqi. This prince will head west. I'll leave the east area to you, Long Fei said. After half a day, he had a rough idea of Gu Qisha's skills. He was too lazy to mix around with him. Splitting up would indeed save him a lot of time. Gu Qisha didn't even reply, but simply turned to leave. Long Fei watched his retreating form as a mocking smile rose to his lips. He seemed to have realized something. He continued to head west and was about to sneak into a hidden warehouse when he caught a glimpse of a familiar white figure. That figure was faster than him and had snuck in before him. Why would they meet here? Bewildered, Long Fei silently followed suit. But he hadn't even gotten close when the white figure abruptly stopped in its tracks. Long Fei did not stop. In a flash, he appeared in front of the white figure and said coldly, "Why are you here? Other than little thing, what else could the white shadow be?" It was no longer a white shadow, but a real white ball. In front of Long Fei, there wasn't a moment when it wouldn't explode. It didn't know what Daddy Long was talking about. It only felt that he was terrifying. It began to retreat timidly. Long Fei was indeed very fierce. Since the little thing appeared here, perhaps Han Yunqi was also nearby. This restless woman, didn't he tell her to stay in the grain store obediently? How dare he sneak into the warehouse of the black market with only a few hidden weapons and no martial arts? If they were caught, they wouldn't even know how they died. Where's Han Yunqi? Long Fei asked. Lilthing was already afraid. After being yelled at, it was so scared that it didn't care about anything else. It turned around and ran for its life. Although it couldn't die, it couldn't help but worry whenever it was alone with Daddy Long. It was afraid that Daddy Long would secretly kill it one day behind Mama Yunqi's back. Seeing Lilthing run, Long Fei assumed it was looking for Han Yunqi and immediately chased after it. Lilthing grew even more afraid and ran for its life. It had no idea what Daddy Long wanted to do. Besides that time in Medicine City, Daddy Long had never chased after it. Long Fei chased after Lilthing until they reached the back courtyard of Wu Shu's grain store. He stopped abruptly, suddenly realizing that Han Yunqi hadn't left the house at all. Lilthing leapt onto the tall wall and fell into the courtyard without looking back. It hadn't planned to come back, but Daddy Long had chased it so closely that it could only seek Mama Yunqi's protection. It really couldn't figure it out. Mama Yunqi was so smart, but why did she fancy a fiend like Daddy Long? Why wasn't Mama Yunqi with its gentleman? If Mama Yunqi and the gentleman were together, its world would be perfect. Long Fei was about to turn and leave when he suddenly turned back. It wasn't clear whether that woman was resting or doing something else. Han Yunqi was currently researching Beauty's tears and perplexing butterfly illusion in her room. Although Long Fei hadn't asked her about it recently, she'd take out the two poisons whenever she had time to study them. She'd either mix them with other poisons or try all sorts of methods to extract the ingredients. Of course, Han Yunqi was also keeping an eye on the poison pond in her detox system. Last time, the detox system had leveled up because of the pond and gained the ability to nurture poisons and create antidotes on its own. When she poisoned Junie Xie, the pond had only produced a handful of poisons. Moreover, she hadn't even created an antidote yet. But now she could produce 10 mature poisons. Right now, Han Yunqi had a bold idea. She wanted to take out the pond water and mix it with perplexing butterfly illusion and Beauty's tears. She wanted to see if it was the two poisons that swallowed the pond water, or if it was the poison pond water that swallowed the poisons. Long Fei turned around and left. Was it because Long Fei saw that Han Yunqi wanted to follow him, or because he liked to let Han Yunqi follow him? Only he himself knew. In any case, Han Yunqi was happily led away by Long Fei. By the time Gu Qisha returned, they were already far away. Gu Qisha couldn't find them in the courtyard and asked everyone in the inn, but no one could give him an answer. Gu Qisha wanted to go to sleep, but when he lay down, he couldn't. What a tragedy! When she found out that Long Fei and Long Fei hadn't found any clues, Han Yunqi forcefully pulled Lilthing out of her sleeve and hung it in front of Long Fei. "Your Highness, it has a way." Han Yunqi smiled mischievously, but Lilthing began to cry. Squeak, squeak, squeak. What way? Long Fei slapped Han Yunqi's hand away. Don't you think it's dirty? How many times have I told you not to keep this thing on you? Even now, Long Fei still didn't think much of Lil Thing. It wasn't because he looked down on its abilities, but because he really didn't like furry little animals like Lil Thing. Lil Thing fell to the ground and hid by Han Yunqi's feet, feeling wronged and terrified. Han Yunqi squatted down and snorted. Lil Thing, go find the gunpowder and show it to him. As she spoke, she took out some sulfur for Lil Thing to sniff. Lil Thing seemed to have been emboldened by Han Yunqi, because Lil Thing actually leaped onto her shoulder and stuck out its tongue at Long Fei before fleeing. Your Highness, hurry and chase after it. It'll find it, Han Yunqi said anxiously. Could Long Fei refuse? Obviously not. For the third time, the Great Duke of Qin chased a little squirrel through the streets and alleys, leaping onto roofs and vaulting over walls. Lil Thing seemed to be holding a grudge this time. It purposely took the most difficult paths, and even went through the dog hole that it disdained the most. It made it seem as if Long Fei would follow suit. Long Fei flew over the high wall with a light tap of his foot. The dog hole had nothing to do with him. Han Yunqi watched, truly anxious for Lil Thing's intelligence. Just as Long Fei was about to lose his patience, Lil Thing suddenly braked, turned around, and squeaked at Han Yunqi. Found it. Han Yunqi was overjoyed. Lil Thing nodded furiously and turned to enter a restaurant. This restaurant was the only one in the black market, and it was listed in Long Fei's information. It was just that he hadn't had time to come over yet. Long Fei led Han Yunqi to catch up with Lil Thing. They went all the way to the wine cellar in the back courtyard of the restaurant. As soon as they reached the entrance, they were greeted by the strong smell of alcohol. They avoided the manservants in the courtyard and entered through the window at the back. They saw that the wine cellar was filled to the brim with wine jars, leaving only a small path for them to walk through. Lil Thing was like an arrow that left the bow. It darted into the depths of the cellar and scratched the ground incessantly. Long Fei and Han Yunqi chased after it and quickly discovered that there was an entrance to the cellar. However, after they entered the cellar, they saw that it was still filled with wine. Where was the gunpowder? Long Fei and Han Yunqi both looked at Lil Thing. Lil Thing ran headfirst into the nearest wine jar and actually smashed it into pieces. Then, Chapter 478. Afterwards, gunpowder as black as coal spilled out of the jug to scatter on the ground. They'd found the gunpowder, hidden in the wine jug in the underground cellar. Han Yunqi was thrilled and immediately took out a bottle of poison to reward Lil Thing. Beautifully done. You're better than both of them. Lil Thing seemed to understand, because it held the bottle of poison in its hands and skipped around happily. Long Fei only pretended not to hear. Cold, he said. Zhang Sun Zilan is quite smart. He used alcohol to cover up the smell of gunpowder. It's stored in a separate altar, and these porcelain jugs are fireproof. Your Highness, this is the safest place, but also the most dangerous place. It's filled with wine. If it catches fire and explodes, the consequences will be unthinkable. Han Yunqi said seriously. Once the gunpowder exploded, the wine jug above would shatter. Under the influence of alcohol, both the explosion and the fire would multiply. Long Fei nodded with interest. He walked over and began to count the number of jugs as if calculating something. Your Highness, what should we do now? Han Yunqi asked. They'd found the gunpowder, but now came the real problem. How were they supposed to threaten Zhang Sun Zilan? Directly threaten Zhang Sun Zilan and force him to hand over evidence of his secret dealings with Medicine City. Otherwise, they'd expose the matter of the gunpowder. Under normal circumstances, such a threat would be effective. But this was the black market, and Zhang Sun Zilan was half its head. How could he be threatened so easily? Most likely, they'd beat the grass and startle the snake instead. Heaven knows how much power Zhang Sun Zilan had in the black market. If they really threatened him, they might never be able to walk out of the black market's gates. Thus, they'd have to take their time and think things over carefully. Your Highness, why don't we just leave the matter to Tianhui, then extend an olive branch to Zhang Sun Zilan? Han Yunqi asked thoughtfully. The reason the black market had existed for so long without being suppressed by the imperial court wasn't because the court feared its power, but because it had a wide range of connections behind it. If the imperial court tried to suppress it, they'd be smashing their own feet with a rock. Thus, the imperial court had always turned a blind eye. As long as the black markets didn't do anything too outrageous, Emperor Tianhui wouldn't make trouble for them. But things were different when it came to gunpowder. It was a direct threat to the capital and imperial power. As soon as Emperor Tianhui found out, his first thought would be to destroy the entire Sky Domain black market. Thus, as long as Long Fei reported the news to Emperor Tianhui, the emperor would definitely exterminate Zhongsun Zilan. At that time, Zhongsun Zilan would have no way out. Long Fei would then extend an olive branch. As long as Zhongsun Zilan handed over evidence of his secret dealings with Medicine City, the Duke of Qin would guarantee his life. Han Yunshi thought for a moment, then added, "Your Highness, we can let Zhongsun Zilan expose the Chu family first, then save him. This way, we can kill two birds with one stone. Rather than using gunpowder to threaten Zhongsun Zilan, he might as well use his life to threaten him." It had to be said that Han Yunshi was becoming more and more skillful. Still, Long Fei only gave her a one-word evaluation. An unnecessary move. Han Yunshi gave a start. "Your Highness has a better idea?" Aside from blowing things up and getting the imperial court involved, Han Yunshi couldn't think of a more complete and safe plan. Long Fei didn't reply, but kept walking inside. He pulled out a few jugs of wine and opened them up for inspection, only to discover that they were all filled with gunpowder. After walking around in a circle, Long Fei had a good idea of how much gunpowder there was. He took Han Yunshi's hand and said, "Let's go." Han Yunshi knew how to deal with the situation. Long Fei had an idea of what to do, but she couldn't guess what he was thinking. After the two of them returned to the Wu clan's grain store, Long Fei whispered a few words to Uncle Wu. Uncle Wu's expression changed before he quickly left the store. "Your Highness, what are you doing?" Han Yunshi couldn't help asking. Long Fei smiled but didn't say anything. He held her as they leapt onto the highest roof. Han Yunshi was confused. Just as she was about to speak, Long Fei suddenly pulled her into his embrace from behind. This was her favorite action. His gentle embrace was like bringing her into his world. Her back, which was the weakest part of her defense, was completely exposed to him. "Your Highness, what's wrong?" Han Yunshi's voice became gentle. Long Fei still didn't say anything. He hugged her and rested his chin on her shoulder. He didn't say anything, so she didn't ask. Even if she didn't know anything, she still couldn't help but enjoy this moment of warmth. At this moment, it was as if there was no distance between them. Those 100 steps seemed to have disappeared, as if they would never be separated again. Not far away, at the same height, Gu Qisha was nestled in a tree branch and sleeping with his arms behind his head. He was having a beautiful dream. He dreamt that he had returned to his childhood, when he was very, very young. Before he had been punished or abandoned, when he was still an ordinary child, his biological father, the dean of the medical academy, had hugged him and gently coaxed him to sleep. "Cheer, be good. Cheer, be good." After a while, there was a sudden commotion on the streets. Very soon, Han Yunshi saw many people fleeing in panic from the direction of the restaurant. Gradually, more and more people gathered, as if they'd all turned out in full force to head for the grain store. Amidst the commotion, Han Yunshi heard someone shout, "Zhongsun Zilan is hiding gunpowder. It's going to explode. The Eastern District is going to explode too. Run. Let's retreat. If we don't, we'll lose our lives." Han Yunshi seemed to have realized something. Just as she was about to turn around, Long Fei gently covered her ears and said gently, "It should be very beautiful. Be good and watch carefully." As soon as he finished speaking, there was a deafening boom. Huge sparks suddenly exploded in the darkness ahead, like a red lotus blooming in the dark night. It exploded. The gunpowder in the wine cellar exploded. Soon, the sound of explosions rang out one after another, followed by the continuous explosion of sparks. Everyone was running for their lives in panic, trying to escape from this terrifying disaster. Only Han Yunshi was in the arms of the man who dominated everything. She covered her ears and enjoyed the magnificent fireworks. Long Fei was right. Putting aside the horror of the fire, it was really, really beautiful to look at from the high roof. Han Yunxi was stunned by the sight. Beside her, Gu Qisha had been jolted awake by the explosion. He jumped up and almost fell down, but fortunately, he managed to grab hold of a tree trunk in time. He had already forgotten what kind of dream he had been dreaming about, and had forgotten the gentle and loving cheer he had heard in his dream. He cursed, "Fuck. Long Fei, you did this? He's playing so big?" Yes, this explosion had been caused by Long Fei Yi. He had just estimated the amount of gunpowder in the underground wine cellar and estimated the area of effect if all the gunpowder and the wine in the wine cellar exploded together. After returning to Uncle Wu's grain store, he immediately ordered Uncle Wu to spread the news that the gunpowder was going to explode and to evacuate everyone in the area of effect. There were not many people in the black market, so it was easy to evacuate everyone. After everyone had left, Uncle Wu went to start the fire. Everything had happened so suddenly that Zhang Sun Zilan probably still did not understand what was going on. The explosions became more and more frequent, and the fire grew bigger and bigger. Before long, the beautiful fireworks could no longer be seen, and only a raging inferno was left. The restaurant and everything around it had been destroyed in an instant, turning into a sea of fire. It was the epicenter of the explosion, and the fire was so big that it quickly spread to the entire street. At this time, not only the Eastern District, but even the Western District was in danger. Not to mention whether they would be affected by the fire. Just the thick smoke alone was enough to kill many people. Soon, the black market's mysterious elders guild appeared and opened several escape doors that had never been opened before. They also mobilized the black market's guards to maintain order and evacuate the crowd. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi stood on the high roof and saw everything clearly. Han Yunxi was so shocked that she couldn't help but laugh. "Your Highness, you actually, is it beautiful?" Long Fei Yi asked seriously. Han Yunxi nodded. "It is indeed beautiful." Could this be considered the first time Long Fei Yi had accompanied her to watch fireworks? It was so thrilling and grand. This fellow always gave her such extravagant surprises. How could she forget? Of course, despite her shock, Han Yunxi was still very calm. "Your Highness, you've destroyed the evidence. What can we use to negotiate with Zhang Sun Zilan? This fellow has a large sum of money in this prince's private bank. What do you think we should use to negotiate with him?" Long Fei Yi asked. Han Yunxi was shocked when she heard this. "Your Highness, you've known Zhang Sun Zilan for a long time?" Han Yunxi then recalled that when Ouyang Ningnua had mentioned Zhang Sun Zilan, Long Fei Yi had not asked much about it. He had only asked who the other owner of the black market was. "I found out about it not too long ago. This prince has known him for a long time, but I didn't know that he was half an owner of the black market," Long Fei Yi said calmly. Han Yunxi's idea was brilliant, but it wasn't as perfect as blowing up the black market. For one thing, the explosion of the black market would be felt by everyone within a 100-li radius. Soon enough, the capital would get wind of the news as well. Emperor Tianhui wouldn't be able to sit still and send people to investigate. Once they found traces of gunpowder, things would get serious. With Emperor Tianhui's distrustful personality, he'd hesitate if Long Fei Yi reported the news. Perhaps he'd even suspect that Long Fei Yi was trying to use the chance to destroy the Chu clan. But if the black market explosion caught Emperor Tianhui's attention, then things would be different. Emperor Tianhui was no fool. Judging from the amount of gunpowder and the power of the black market, he'd easily suspect the Chu clan. Secondly, once the black market exploded, all of Zhang Sun Zilan's most profitable businesses would be destroyed. Long Fei Yi only needed to secretly spread the news that Zhang Sun Zilan was half an owner of the black market. That way, the imperial court would keep an eye on Zhang Sun Zilan. Although they'd have no evidence to arrest him, they'd at least put him on the list of suspects. Then all of Zhang Sun Zilan's legitimate businesses in Tianning would be frozen. Then Long Fei Yi would have the perfect excuse to freeze all of Zhang Sun Zilan's silver in the private bank. For a successful businessman like him, what could be more tragic than being penniless? What else did a businessman value more than money? Long Fei Yi wasn't planning to threaten him with gunpowder or his life, but money. Thirdly, once the black market exploded and the gunpowder was destroyed, neither the Chu clan nor Emperor Tianhui would be able to get their hands on it. The power of Tianix's black market would disappear as well. For Long Feiyi, he'd have one less enemy when he took control of the capital in the future. Han Yunqi didn't know what to say after listening to Long Feiyi's analysis. She didn't just admire this man, but worshipped him. The flames were starting to spread, but the explosions were still going on. There was no way to put them out. Long Feiyi took Han Yunqi with him and left as well. Gu Qisha couldn't help but sigh as he watched them leave. Oh Yang Ning Nuo, what's the point of writing it down in black and white? Chapter 479. What's the point of it being written in black and white? Ouyang Ning Nuo tore the contract to shreds as soon as he escaped from the black market. This was the biggest failure of his business career and the most thorough loss he'd ever suffered in a business negotiation. The contract stated that he wouldn't take a single cent of the profits from the partnership between Pill Fiend Pharmacy and Medicine City. However, Long Feiyi wouldn't interfere with any of Zhang Sunzealand's businesses. When Long Feiyi had agreed to this condition, Ouyang Ning Nuo had been puzzled. However, he couldn't find any loopholes in the contract. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that Long Feiyi would detonate the gunpowder and blow up the entire black market. After all, he was the other boss of Sky Domain Black Market. When he first learned that Zhang Sunzealand was working with Western Zhou's Chu clan to smuggle gunpowder, Ouyang Ning Nuo had been looking for an opportunity to topple Zhang Sunzealand and swallow the other half of Sky Domain Black Market. When Gu Beiwei told him about Pill Fiend Pharmacy, he knew his chance had come. Once Long Feiyi found out about the gunpowder in the black market, Zhang Sunzealand would be finished. Ouyang Ning Nuo was waiting for Long Feiyi to make a move. He was waiting for Zhang Sunzealand to be driven into a corner and sell off his businesses. Then, Ouyang Ning Nuo would be able to keep a low profile and slowly become the only boss of Sky Domain Black Market. But this perfect plan had been ruined by Long Feiyi. Not only did Ouyang Ning Nuo lose Zhang Sunzealand's businesses, he'd also lost the other half of his business. Moreover, Long Feiyi hadn't broken the contract. The contract stated that he couldn't interfere with Zhang Sunzealand's businesses, but it didn't say that he couldn't destroy them. In any case, would Long Fei admit that burning it down counted as a form of meddling in their affairs? Would Long Feiyi admit that he was the one who started the fire? Damn it! Ouyang Ning Nuo, who had always been good-tempered, was furious. He scattered the pieces of the contract on the ground and stomped on them several times, but he still couldn't calm down. Although legitimate businesses were profitable, how could they make money as fast as the black market? Who knew how long it would take to recoup the losses this time? Moreover, Sky Domain Black Market was connected to many officials in Tianix's imperial court. Now that the black market was gone, the chain of profits was gone as well. If he wanted to win over these people to facilitate his other businesses, he'd have to think of another way. Long Feiyi, you better not fall into my hands one day. Ouyang Ning Nuo spat out those words before turning around to leave. Meanwhile, the other boss of the black market, Zhang Sunzealand, had just arrived. As soon as he got off the carriage, he saw that the black market's emergency exits had all been opened. Everyone had fled, and thick smoke billowed out of the black market. He stared blankly for a moment and was about to rush in when a servant hurriedly pulled him back. "Master, everything has been blown up and burned. We can't go in." Zhang Sunzealand fiercely slapped him and said angrily, "What nonsense are you spouting?" Scram! Pushing the servant aside, he recklessly rushed towards the door. However, just as he reached the door, he was choked by the thick smoke that gushed out. He coughed for a while before he could catch his breath. None of the servants behind him dared to approach. Zhang Sunzealand stared blankly at the exit, forced to accept the fact that the gunpowder had exploded. He felt like he'd suffered a huge blow, and it took him a long time to recover. When Chu Tianyin had first sought him out for a partnership, he'd drawn him a beautiful blueprint. The first thing he'd promised was to use the power of the imperial court to help him seize the other half of Sky Domain Black Market from Ouyang Ning Nuo's hands. But now, Zhang Sunzealand recovered his wits and roared, "How did the wine cellar explode?" Was the explosion an accident, or was it man-made? If it was an accident, he might be able to escape. If it was man-made, then he was doomed. Master, news of the gunpowder in the wine cellar suddenly spread. Half of the black market knew about it and fled. That's why the wine cellar exploded. Someone must be messing with us on purpose. The servant reported. Zhang Sun Zielin's expression turned even uglier. Just then, the sound of hurried hooves could be heard. It was the arrival of the government. The first few explosions in the black market had caused as much of a commotion as an earthquake. Everyone in the surrounding villages had sensed it. It had only been a little over 2 hours, but the nearest government office had already sent people over. Soon, the capital governor's men, the imperial guards, and many other forces would arrive. Despite his despair, Zhang Sun Zilin still managed to calm down. He immediately boarded the carriage. Returned to the imperial capital, quickly. Someone had done this on purpose. The imperial court would definitely investigate him soon. He had to hurry back and prepare a backup plan. At the very least, he had to transfer all of his assets and businesses. Stockpiling gunpowder was a threat to the imperial capital. If the imperial court wanted to investigate him, they didn't need any evidence. They would first seal off all of his avenues of escape and trap him in the imperial capital before slowly discussing the evidence with him. With the departure of the 2 leaders of the black market, the council of elders that had been established by them naturally disbanded on its own. Everyone had left, leaving behind a burning mess. When they returned to the hibiscus courtyard, Han Yunshi finally spoke up. "Your Highness, are we really keeping him here? So you don't have to run away all day," Long Feiyi replied mildly. If Gu Qisha had stayed anywhere else, he would have gone to Han Yunshi every 2 or 3 days to discuss the Medicine Ghost Valley. She really would have had to run away all day. Your Highness is too considerate. Han Yunshi didn't think much of it. As expected, Gu Qisha found Han Yunshi that very afternoon to discuss the design of Pill Fiend Pharmacy's storehouse. Han Yunshi invited him to the flower gardens to discuss the matter. Naturally, Long Feiyi accompanied them. Needless to say, Gu Qisha was quite attentive. He'd picked out a few details on the storehouse design plans since he was the most knowledgeable about medicine. Han Yunshi would listen to him unconditionally. A few days later, various versions of the gunpowder explosion spread throughout the capital city. Some of the rumors came from Long Feiyi himself. Emperor Tianhui was furious and ordered a strict investigation into the source of the gunpowder. He also listed Zhang Sun Zilin, Ouyang Ningnua, and a few other merchants with connections to the black market as suspects. All of their businesses in Tianning were sealed off for further investigation. Although Zhang Sun Zilin and Ouyang Ningnua were both bosses of the black market, Zhang Sun Zilin couldn't compare to Ouyang Ningnua, the head of Cloud Realm Trade Consortium. Ouyang Ningnua's businesses in Tianning were sealed off, but he still had plenty of businesses in Northern Li, Western Zhou, and even Medicine and Medical City. He wouldn't go bankrupt, and Emperor Tianhui wouldn't dare to be too rude and unreasonable with his status. But Zhang Sun Zilin was in trouble. Most of his businesses were in Tianning, so Emperor Tianhui was sure to eat him up. Less than 5 days after the gunpowder explosion, he finally decided to give up everything in Tianning and went alone to Tianning's largest private bank, Abundant Treasure Private Bank. He told the manager directly, "I'll have to trouble you to inform His Highness Duke of Qin that Zhang Sun Zilin requests an audience." Few people knew the identity of the owner of Abundant Treasure Private Bank, so the manager had no choice but to make the report. How many taxes had the Sky Domain black market stolen from the National Treasury? How many legitimate businesses had they suppressed in Tianning? How many people in dire need had they cheated? How could Long Feiyi treat Zhang Sun Zilin nicely? Currently, he was brewing tea with Han Yunshi in the back courtyard. Coldly, he ordered the manager, "Have him wait a moment. Wait a moment." Thus, Zhang Sun Zilin waited anxiously for an entire day in the private bank. If he wasn't under someone else's control, he would have slammed the door and left. All of the silver drafts in his hands were of high value. The 10 or so of them were the real gold and silver he'd saved up over the years from both illegal and illegal businesses. It was also the only thing he could use to escape overseas and make a comeback. Because the face value was too high, In order to prevent theft, if he wanted to take out these banknotes to trade or receive cash from foreign banks, he had to stamp it with his own seal and that of the master of Baofeng Bank. Thus, he had to see His Highness Duke of Qin no matter what. He waited and waited until it was finally time for dinner. The manager brought Zhang Sunzilan to the tea room. Chapter 480. Zhang Sunzilan had already waited an entire day to see His Highness Duke of Qin. Although he had been filled with anxiety, nervousness, and fear, he still maintained his rationality and considered the pros and cons of the situation. He didn't know that the mastermind behind the gunpowder case was His Highness Duke of Qin, but he could more or less sense that His Highness Duke of Qin was deliberately making things difficult for him. Anyone who deliberately made things difficult for him must have ulterior motives. Thus, he had been pondering how to deal with it. After entering, he calmly bowed with clasped hands. "This one is Zhang Sunzilan. Greetings to Your Highness Duke of Qin and esteemed Wang Fei." Long Fei looked down at him with disdain. "You're half a master of Sky Domain Black Market. With such a powerful background, you dare to call yourself a commoner in front of this prince? This prince can't afford it." The trace of mockery on Long Fei's lips made Zhang Sunzilan tremble with fear. Although he had mentally prepared himself, he still feared this cold prince. "Your Highness Duke of Qin, you're shortening this one's lifespan," Zhang Sunzilan said anxiously. Long Fei smiled coldly. "To what do I owe the honor of your presence today?" Zhang Sunzilan pulled out a stack of banknotes from his sleeve. "Your Highness, this one is here to ask for your stamp. This banknote has been in your bank for several years. It just so happens that there's a good project coming up, so this one wants to use it all." Zhang Sunzilan spoke as if the gunpowder case hadn't happened, and the rumors outside weren't true. Han Yunshi felt admiration. "Unfortunately, His Majesty has sealed off all of your assets. What do you think this prince should do?" Long Fei asked. Zhang Sunzilan grew anxious. "Your Highness Duke of Qin, this one can accept that others don't believe me, but you can't not believe me. This one wants to ask you to uphold justice for this one." As he spoke, he actually took out half a stack of banknotes and placed it on the table. Han Yunshi walked over and picked up the banknotes, counting them one by one. Seeing this, Zhang Sunzilan was overjoyed and hurriedly said, "Esteemed Wang Fei, the bank belongs to His Highness. Everything here is decided by His Highness. Even His Majesty can't interfere, right?" "That's right." Han Yunshi smiled beautifully. Zhang Sunzilan became even happier and handed over a few more. "Esteemed Wang Fei, please kindly accept them." Han Yunshi still took it and said with a smile, "There's a total of 15 pieces. That's 60 million taels." Zhang Sunzilan nodded repeatedly. This was half of his savings, and was not a small sum. He had asked around before coming here. Apparently, if he could deal with Qin Wang Fei, he could basically deal with His Highness Duke of Qin. Unexpectedly, Han Yunshi turned to look at Long Fei. "Your Highness, is a mere 60 million enough to bribe you?" Long Fei said. Zhang Sunzilan finally realized that Qin Wang Fei was the most difficult person to deal with, not the Duke of Qin. She was definitely a woman who wanted a yard after getting an inch. At this point, other than denying that he was the one who had obtained the gunpowder, he could also expose Chu Tianyin. To reply, "Esteemed Wang Fei, this one understands that the gunpowder came from Western Zhou's Chu clan. The Chu clan's young master, Chu Tianyin, smuggled it in through wine jugs. There was supposed to be another batch next year, but it looks like there won't be any more," Zhang Sunzilan replied. "Chu Tianyin? How many people does the Chu clan have hidden in the capital?" Han Yunshi asked. "This one understands that there are quite a few, but this one doesn't know the specifics," Zhang Sunzilan replied honestly. Han Yunshi couldn't help but recall Su Xiaoyu's rainbow signal flares. It looked like the Chu clan had long set up an ambush in Tianning's capital. "Your Highness, esteemed Wang Fei, this one even saw Chu Tianyin once last month. This one estimates that he should be in Tianning right now. Perhaps he's even hiding in the capital." Zhang Sunzilan didn't dare to speak. After all, Chu Tianyin was probably looking for him everywhere to silence him. Originally, Long Fei and Han Yunqi only wanted to get evidence of Medicine City's collusion with the black market, but they ended up getting news of the Chu clan instead. Both of them were surprised and wary. Hand over the evidence, and your lordship will arrange for you to leave tonight. Long Fei finally opened his golden mouth. Delighted, Zhang Sun Zilan hurried back to retrieve the evidence. Naturally, he wouldn't leave such an important item in the black market. The evidence was a thick ledger that recorded in detail who the three great clans of Medicine City were, when, what they sent to the black market, how much Zhang Sun Zilan had sold for, and how much he'd split with those people. Every stroke of the ledger was extremely detailed and stamped with a seal. Han Yunqi flipped through a few pages and was truly happy. With this evidence, would Medicine City still refuse to compromise? Once the evidence was in their hands, Long Fei finally stamped Zhang Sun Zilan's banknotes and arranged for guards to escort him out. As for the silver that Zhang Sun Zilan had offered, Long Fei said to treat it as a black market donation to the Han clan's clinic. Your Highness, how about we go to Medicine City tomorrow? Han Yunqi was especially excited. What are we going to do? Long Fei asked. Negotiate, of course. Have them supply us with goods. They must always supply us with low-grade, high-quality ingredients. Han Yunqi said seriously. Long Fei stroked her bangs and smiled. If they want to negotiate, it should be them coming to the capital. What are you going to do? Why did this stupid girl like to run away all the time? With a bargaining chip in hand, as long as he sent a message to the three great clans of Medicine City, they would be in a hurry to come. Just like that, Long Fei took Han Yunqi back to his residence. Of course, before returning, he sent someone to let Long Tianma know that Chu Tianyin might be in the capital. Let Long Tianma and Chu Tianyin slowly fight it out, and let the people of Medicine City come from afar. He had to find some time to deal with the person living in his residence. After dragging things out for so long, it was time to take off the mask. One by one, they weekly posted their username on Weibo. I am GMO. Chapter 481. Early in the morning, Han Yunqi had just woken up when Zhao Mama came to report. Esteemed Wang Fei, His Highness has invited Pill Fiend to drink tea in the garden. He wants you to come along. Han Yunqi almost thought that she was still dreaming. Long Fei was inviting Gu Qi Sha to drink tea? Did the sun rise from the west today? Really? Han Yunqi asked doubtfully. Before Zhao Mama could answer, Su Xiaoyu spoke first. Acting like a big sister, she placed her hands on her hips and said confidently, Mistress, His Highness must be plotting something. He's up to no good. After returning to Leisurely Cloud Pavilion after losing her memories, Su Xiaoyu was much more diligent than before. Every day, she would snatch away Bailey Mingxiang and Zhao Mama's chores, disliking them for being slow. Now, she was fighting with Bailey Mingxiang over watering the poisonous plants in the courtyard. Impudent. Is His Highness someone you can criticize? Zhao Mama immediately reprimanded. Han Yunqi had long since gotten used to Su Xiaoyu's mouth. She smiled and said, Let's go. Come with me to see what His Highness is up to. When they arrived at the garden, Long Fei was already sitting down to brew tea. Today, he wasn't dressed in his usual black robes, his black hair tied up in a bun, looking cold and mysterious. His hair was tied up with a white jade hairpin. His white robes were embroidered with cloud sleeves, making him look noble and elegant. He was sitting cross-legged on the bamboo couch in the pavilion. He was so handsome that he looked like a celestial in a painting. His every movement was elegant. Han Yunqi had forgotten how long it had been since she last saw His Highness in white. She liked this kind of His Highness Duke of Qin. This kind of him had the smell of sunshine, was more approachable, and lacked that cold and cruel aura. She purposely stopped in her tracks and quietly watched him. It was as if time would stop at this moment if she didn't move. Mistress, you like His Highness Duke of Qin very much, right? Su Xiaoyu asked. Han Yunqi tilted her head and looked at her. Nonsense. How much do you like it? Su Xiaoyu asked again. Han Yunqi pretended not to hear and did not answer. Su Xiaoyu asked again, Do you like him so much that you'll die without him? Han Yunqi finally couldn't ignore her. She looked at her with disdain. You're so young, but you're always asking about death. You're not cute at all. Cuteness can't be eaten. Su Xiaoyu snorted. As the master and servant chatted, Gu Qisha suddenly appeared from the side. Good morning, little girl. Han Yunqi and Su Xiaoyu were both startled. At this moment, Long Fei Yi had already stood up in the pavilion and looked over from afar. Morning, Han Yunqi replied indifferently. Su Xiaoyu sized up Gu Qisha, who was dressed in black, and said coldly, "What the hell is this early in the morning?" Unexpectedly, as soon as she said this, her throat suddenly tightened. At the same time, Han Yunqi's detoxification system warned her that there was poison in her surroundings. Su Xiaoyu clutched her neck, unable to make a sound. She was so frightened that she grabbed Han Yunqi's hand and begged for help. The detoxification system had already determined that Su Xiaoyu had been poisoned by a mute poison. The most frightening thing about this poison was that if it wasn't neutralized within the time it took for a joss stick to burn, it would never be neutralized. Han Yunqi immediately took out the detoxification system's antidote from her medical pouch and gave it to Su Xiaoyu. However, just as Su Xiaoyu's throat felt a little better, her legs suddenly turned to jelly and she fell to her knees without any warning. Poison again. This was a poison that could harm a person's shins and bones. It needed to be neutralized immediately, otherwise, the person would be permanently crippled. The detoxification system quickly gave her another antidote. This antidote could not be taken directly. It had to be sprayed on the knees for it to be effective. Sit down and roll up your trousers, Han Yunqi immediately ordered. When Su Xiaoyu saw Han Yunqi's serious expression, she didn't dare to delay and hurriedly did as she was told. However, just as Han Yunqi was about to spray the antidote, Su Xiaoyu suddenly burst into tears and blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. Finally, Han Yunqi grew angry and stood up. Gu Qisha, don't you know that children's words carry no harm? How could you use such a vicious poison? The poison that Su Xiaoyu had been poisoned was naturally Gu Qisha's doing. Gu Qisha chuckled and said, "Children's words carry no harm? Do you think she's a 3-year-old child?" Han Yunqi couldn't be bothered to pay attention to him and focused on neutralizing Su Xiaoyu's poison. Who would have thought that Gu Qisha would continue to poison her? When Han Yunqi smelled the scent of poison, she immediately said coldly, "That's enough." Gu Qisha glanced at the white figure in the pavilion and grinned. "An apology is enough. Don't even think about it." Su Xiaoyu fumed. Wouldn't it be a loss for her to apologize after being poisoned so many times? Blood began to flow from the corner of her mouth again at those words. Han Yunqi handed the antidote to Su Xiaoyu and shielded her behind her back. Cold, she looked at Gu Qisha from head to toe. "Your Excellency Pill Fiend not only has superb medical skills, but poison skills as well. How unexpected." Han Yunqi had seen everything clearly just then. This fellow hadn't even gotten close to Su Xiaoyu before he'd poisoned her. Moreover, he'd done it with such precision that it was no small feat at the very least. As far as she knew, there weren't many people in Cloud Realm continent with such skills. Junixia was one of them, while Gu should have similar skills as well. Medicine and poison come from the same family. Gu Qisha admitted openly, but stopped using poisons. In a moment of excitement, he'd revealed his poison skills. He really shouldn't have done that. He was about to change the topic when Han Yunqi wouldn't let it go. "Your Excellency Pill Fiend couldn't have been banished from Medical City for secretly studying poisons, right?" Han Yunqi couldn't figure out why Pill Fiend was so talented when she first heard about him. How could Medical City bear to throw him away? Just what kind of crime did he commit to be banished by the Medical Academy? Could he have committed a crime against the Medical Academy that involved the poison sect? Although medicine and poison came from the same family, his poison skills weren't ordinary at all. Gu Qisha smiled, but a sinister glint flashed past his eyes. No comment. His original plan was to use Su Xiaoyu's insults to cause a ruckus with Han Yunqi, but now that they'd changed the subject, Gu Qisha stopped himself. As he spoke, he turned to leave. Han Yunqi hurriedly chased after him and beat around the bush. "Gu Qisha, do you know how to cultivate poisons?" Gu Qisha didn't answer, so Han Yunqi smiled and said, "It's not like being able to use poisons is something to be ashamed of. Why don't you share it with us so we can compare notes?" Gu Qisha still didn't speak, but Han Yunshi didn't give up. Gu Qisha walked quickly, then slowly. Sometimes he'd look back, sometimes he'd laugh out loud, but he still refused to answer. From Long Fei Ye's perspective, this scene looked like a couple flirting with each other. He narrowed his eyes dangerously, his gaze frighteningly deep as the temperature around them dropped. He picked up the cup of red South Peak he'd prepared and threw it without warning. Heaven knows how much strength he'd used, but the teacup flew like an arrow towards Gu Qisha's face. He'd originally planned to sit down and have a drink of red South Peak and have a nice chat, but now he was going to rip off Gu Qisha's mask. Gu Qisha sensed the approaching threat before Han Yunshi did, so he abruptly turned around and gestured for Han Yunshi to follow him. However, in the next instant, he turned sideways and allowed the teacup to fly towards Han Yunshi. Han Yunshi suddenly saw a teacup hurtling towards her. For a moment, she couldn't recover her wits and froze in place. Long Fei panicked. He was about to throw a hidden dart at the teacup when Gu Qisha beat him to it. He raised his leg coolly and viciously kicked the teacup out of the air. He chuckled and turned around to look at Long Fei. "Who is it? Why are you in such a bad mood so early in the morning?" Han Yunshi's mind was preoccupied with Gu Qisha's extraordinary poison skills, so she wasn't in the mood to flirt with him. How could she possibly have realized that there was something wrong with their chase just now? She looked suspiciously at Long Fei. This guy's temper really isn't small. Why did he suddenly invite Gu Qisha over for tea? Long Fei didn't speak, but tossed out another teacup and aimed it at Gu Qisha's face. Naturally, Gu Qisha dodged out of the way before doing a somersault to land on a nearby tree. "Your Highness Duke of Qin, are you certain you invited this old man here for tea?" "We're here for tea. Why wouldn't you dare to drink?" Long Fei retorted. As he spoke, he threw another teacup at Gu Qisha. Gu Qisha immediately caught it. Gu Qisha's skill in throwing out teacups was impressive, but his catching skills weren't bad either. Not a single drop of South Peak red spilled out of the teacup. After all, not everyone was like Long Fei, who could tell the difference between the same type of tea with a single sniff. Gu Qisha only knew that this was black tea. After determining that it wasn't poisonous, he slowly tasted it. As he sipped on it, Long Fei walked over with the teacup in his hand. "How's the taste?" Gu Qisha vaguely sensed that something was wrong, but he didn't back down. He jumped down from the tree and said, "Give me another cup." Long Fei poured the tea as he spoke. Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop's specialty tea is South Peak Red. I drank it back in Medicine Ghost Valley too. "What? You're not familiar with this tea?" Gu Qisha's eyes turned cold as he tensed up. On the side, Han Yunshi didn't notice the tense atmosphere between Long Fei and Gu Qisha. She finally realized that Gu Qisha had given them the original South Peak Red. No wonder she found it so familiar. Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop had already been sealed up by Long Fei, so the South Peak Red there belonged to Long Fei. He wouldn't sell it. Could it be that Gu had planted it somewhere else and was selling it again? Or Han Yunshi was still puzzling over the situation when Chu Shifeng suddenly ran over, his face full of anxiety. "Your Highness, there's a guest requesting an audience." Long Fei didn't even ask who the guest was, but simply said, "I won't see him." But Chu Shifeng was put in a difficult position. After some hesitation, he hurried forward to whisper something in Long Fei's ear. It wasn't clear what he said, but Long Fei's expression shifted slightly. He told Han Yunshi, "Wait for me in the pavilion. I'll be right back." Then he left in a hurry, as if something urgent had happened. As soon as Long Fei was gone, Han Yunshi called over a servant girl. "Serve His Excellency Pill Fiend well." Anyone who could come to the Duke of Qin's estate to request an audience couldn't be an ordinary person. Moreover, someone who could make Chu Shifeng so nervous was even more unusual. At the very least, the visitor had to have the ability to gain face from the Duke of Qin. Just who had come? Did they have something urgent to discuss? Han Yunshi was filled with curiosity as she stealthily chased after him. Gu Qisha stared doubtfully at the teacup in his hands as a complicated look flickered past his eyes. Then he followed after Han Yunshi on the sly. But when Han Yunshi entered the guest hall through a side door, she saw a woman standing very close to Long Fei. This was none other than Western Zhou's princess, Duanmu Yao, whom she hadn't seen in ages. She just breathed into his ear. "Imin, go ahead." Long Feiyi seemed to understand. Such an intimate action was an eyesore to Duanmu Yao, but she still managed to keep her cool. It wasn't easy to get a chance to leave the mountain, so she definitely couldn't screw it up. Although Duanmu Yao kept staring at her, Han Yunxi didn't pay her any more attention. Confident and at ease, she lifted her chin high and gracefully left without looking back. She didn't want to lose her confidence in front of this woman. However, after she left, her eyes couldn't help but darken. Long Feiyi, how many more steps are there between us? The past few days have been too warm. I almost thought that we've finished those 100 steps. There are many things about you, about Tianshan Kinzo, about the Tang sect, I haven't asked. Are you not going to take the initiative to tell me? If one day I stubbornly ask, will you be willing to tell me? Han Yunxi really didn't turn back to look at the situation in the room. She personally went to prepare tea and snacks. When she returned, Long Feiyi was already sitting in the main seat. Duanmu Yao was in the guest seat. When she saw Han Yunxi come in, Duanmu Yao didn't say anything, as if afraid that Han Yunxi would overhear her. This was undoubtedly a silent protest. Han Yunxi didn't mind their silence. She laid out the tea and snacks, then gracefully sat in the main seat across from Long Feiyi. She personally took a piece of cake and handed it to him. "Your Highness." Long Feiyi didn't like to eat cakes, especially desserts that this woman liked. When they were drinking tea together, she had offered him desserts several times, but after being rejected, she stopped. But now, Long Feiyi looked at the transparent cake in front of him. He was a little helpless, but he still took it and took a bite. However, this mouthful immediately refreshed him. So sour, comparable to vinegar. "Your Highness, you don't like it? Then try another one." Han Yunxi hurriedly brought over another cake and handed it to Long Feiyi. Long Feiyi looked at her innocently. He still didn't refuse and took another bite. He almost vomited. It was extremely sour. It was so sour that his teeth hurt. "You don't like it either?" Han Yunxi asked seriously. Long Feiyi was helpless, but he also wanted to laugh. How could there be such a woman? He loved and hated her. She brought over 2 cakes, and they were both sour. No doubt, she was warning him that she had knocked over a jar of vinegar. Long Fei didn't reply, but silently ate the 2 pastries. Han Yunxi wasn't appeased at all. Instead, she felt sorry for him and hurriedly poured tea for him. Duanmu Yao couldn't sit still anymore. She stood up and asked seriously, "Senior brother, can we go now?" "Go?" Where were they going? Han Yunxi finally cast a questioning look at Long Feiyi. However, Long Feiyi didn't explain anything. He said in a low voice, "Be good and stay in the residence. Don't run around. I'll be back in a few days." There were many things that she didn't ask. She had been waiting for him to tell her. However, this time, Han Yunxi asked without hesitation, "Where are you going with her? Did something happen?" Long Feiyi evaded the question. "I'll be back in a few days. Must we go?" Oh. Han Yunxi was silent for a moment. Then she whispered, "Your Highness, can you take me with you?" At this time, Duanmu Yao urged again. Her voice was soft and coquettish. "Senior brother, let's go quickly." Han Yunxi looked at Long Feiyi. Her lovely eyes didn't contain pleading, but hope. Pleading and hope were 2 completely different things. She liked him, but she never forced him. She only hoped and hoped for him. "Your Highness, I want to go." She was very honest. However, Long Feiyi ultimately disappointed her. He stroked her bangs as usual and said indifferently, "Be good and stay here. Don't run around. Stay away from Gu Qi Sha." After saying that, he got up and left with Duanmu Yao. Han Yunxi sat in silence and watched until Long Feiyi and Duanmu Yao's figures disappeared into the distance. Only then did she reach out to stroke her bangs. She foolishly stroked them. Suddenly, her heart felt suffocated. It was so suffocating that it felt unbearable. It turned out that it was just her own wishful thinking. There were still many more steps to take. No matter how important or confidential the matter was, as long as Long Feiyi didn't want to, Who could stop him from keeping it a secret? Who could stop him from bringing her along? It turned out that she hadn't entered his world. She was still at the door. Outside the window, Gu Qisha narrowed his eyes when he saw Han Yunqi's disappointed expression. He walked over carelessly. "Little girl, did you get dumped?" Han Yunqi glared at him. "You were eavesdropping." "I was eavesdropping. I didn't hear anything either. I don't know what that Duanmu Yao was whispering to Long Fei Yi," Gu Qisha said unhappily. "Whispering?" Han Yunqi was shocked. Gu Qisha's gaze was somewhat evasive, but he still said loudly, "They were really close. Io, if this Princess Duanmu had married into the Duke of Qin's estate as a concubine, it would have been better than being crippled." Han Yunqi's attention was completely focused on the first half of Gu Qisha's sentence. Her face darkened as she got up and left. Gu Qisha quickly chased after her and followed Han Yunqi all the way to the back gates of the Duke of Qin's estate. Han Yunqi was about to leave when Chu Shifeng appeared. "Esteemed Wang Fei, His Highness isn't here. It's best if you don't go out." Han Yunqi gave him a cold glare that made Chu Shifeng subconsciously back away. Her gaze was even more frightening than His Highness's, enough to kill. Of course, Chu Shifeng did back away, but none of the page boys dared to open the door. All of them were blocking the way. "Out of the way," Han Yunqi said coldly. The page boys all looked towards Chu Shifeng, who only pursed his lips in silence. "Don't make me say it again. Out of the way," Han Yunqi said sternly. The page boys were scared out of their wits, but they still didn't move. Han Yunqi activated her assassination weapons and shot out multiple needles at the page boys' knees. One by one, they collapsed to the ground, their legs numb and unable to move. Chu Shifeng panicked and rushed forward to block the needles. "Esteemed Wang Fei, His Highness has orders." Before he could finish, Han Yunqi said coldly, "To put me under house arrest?" "No." Chu Shifeng was scared to death. His Highness had only said to be on guard against Gu Qisha, but nothing else. If esteemed Wang Fei left the estate, how were they supposed to guard against him? "If you're not, then out of the way." "Don't." Han Yunqi hadn't finished when Chu Shifeng stepped aside. He didn't want to be poisoned. How was he supposed to follow her out if he was poisoned? Gu Qisha grinned from one side. When he saw Han Yunqi leave, he didn't go through the back door, but climbed over the wall to follow behind her. "Lass, let's go take a look at Pill Fiend Pharmacy. They're starting work on the warehouse today. Stay away from me." Han Yunqi mounted her horse and rode off. Naturally, Gu Qisha chased after her relentlessly, while Chu Shifeng and a large group of guards followed suit. It wasn't until the front and back gates of the Duke of Qin's estate had quieted down and Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi had left the estate that Chu Tianyin ordered his scouts to withdraw. After the black market explosion, Long Tianma had been causing trouble for the Chu clan in front of Emperor Tianhui. Chu Tianyin should have focused on dealing with the man himself, but Ouyang Ningnua's secret missive had allowed him to see through Long Fei Yi's plans. As long as Duanmu Yao could keep Long Fei Yi busy, he'd make Long Fei Yi regret detonating the gunpowder. Both Gu Qisha and Chu Shifeng assumed that Han Yunqi would leave the city to chase after His Highness Duke of Qin. Unexpectedly, Han Yunqi rode her horse in a circle around the city before heading for the Gu estate. Currently, Gu Beiwei was reading medical books in the garden. Lil Thing was curled up on one side sleeping, but as soon as it smelled its master's scent, it jumped to its feet and stared at Gu Beiwei with wide eyes. "What's wrong?" Gu Beiwei's voice was as warm as the winter sun. Lil Thing really liked this voice. If it could die while listening to it, it'd feel happy. It squeaked a few more times before running out the door. Gu Beiwei immediately chased after it, only to see the steward walking towards them. "Master, esteemed Wang Fei has graced us with her presence. There's also a black-robed man who looks like His Excellency Pill Fiend." Gu Beiwei was a little surprised, but more than that, he was pleasantly surprised. His smile brightened as he said, "Quick, receive her." Chapter 483. The main gates of the Gu estate were tightly shut all year round, never opening for anyone. Gu Beiwei held a high position, but he stood alone. He didn't involve himself in politics. Nor did he make friends with anyone in the imperial court. He didn't even make friends with anyone. There were many nobles in the imperial court and palace who tried to curry favor with Gu Beiwei, and some even tried to blackmail him. However, the Gu estate's main gates had never been opened for anyone. Imperial physician Gu had always said that he would come to the imperial physician courtyard if there was a problem. But today, he had personally opened the main gates to welcome Han Yunqi. Han Yunqi didn't know that this was a special case. She only thought that Gu Beiwei was being polite. Gu Beiwei was indeed very respectful. As soon as the gates opened, he bowed respectfully. Esteemed Wang Fei, you've graced us with your presence. Please forgive this humble official for not going out to meet you. No need for formalities. Han Yunqi was already used to Gu Beiwei acting this way. She glanced at him. Aren't you leaving yet? Leaving? Where? Gu Qisha feigned ignorance. You're not welcome here, Imperial Physician Gu, Han Yunqi said bluntly. Esteemed Wang Fei, His Highness Duke of Qin dumped you. You should go look for him. Don't vent your anger on me. Gu Qisha sighed helplessly. This guy really has a foul mouth. It's no wonder Han Yunqi doesn't like him. Han Yunqi was still fuming, so when she heard this, her face darkened. What nonsense are you spouting? Gu Qisha became serious. Girl, this old man isn't joking with you. Long Fei isn't a good person. And you're a good person? Han Yunqi retorted. Didn't you see him and that little junior sister of his? Before Gu Qisha could finish, Han Yunqi coldly cut him off. His Highness's sect has an urgent matter to attend to. If you keep spouting nonsense, I'll poison your mouth. TSK, TSK, TSK. Gu Qisha sneered. Esteemed Wang Fei is so magnanimous. You're the good-for-nothing one. Han Yunqi didn't forget to curse back. She was a stubborn girl. Even though she was extremely depressed, she still maintained a proud expression on her face and defended Long Fei to the end. The couple's internal conflicts should be resolved internally. There was no need for outsiders to interfere. Gu Qisha seemed to be really angry now. You damned girl, that portion of antidote was actually… Before Gu Qisha could explain himself, Gu Beiwei cut him off. Esteemed Wang Fei, it's windy outside. Please come inside. It's windy in the middle of summer? Han Yunqi finally calmed down a little. She knew that it was inappropriate to make a ruckus at the entrance. Stop him. Leaving these words behind, she strode into the room. Gu Qisha naturally wanted to follow, but Gu Beiwei hurriedly blocked him with his body. Lord Pill Fiend, scram! Gu Qisha didn't hold back at all. Gu Beiwei maintained his warm smile and asked in a low voice, Lord Pill Fiend, what's wrong with esteemed Wang Fei? Gu Qisha was already planning to climb over the wall, but when he saw Gu Beiwei's attitude, he was surprised. What does it have to do with you? Gu Beiwei pretended not to hear and continued. This one has seen Pill Fiend Pharmacy's blueprints. This one mentioned it to esteemed Wang Fei before, but this one still needs to take charge of the warehouse. Has this one seen it yet? Were you the one who made those changes? Gu Qisha asked. That's right. Compared to Lord Pill Fiend, this one can be considered an insider. I apologize for my inappropriateness. Gu Beiwei patiently explained, but Han Yunqi had already walked far away. Gu Qisha didn't realize that Gu Beiwei was deliberately stalling for time. He sneered, You're quite capable. Why didn't you return to the medical academy? Based on your grandfather's relationship and your current position, you should at least be a 6th-rank doctor, right? I won't hide it from Lord Pill Fiend. This one isn't very interested in medical school, Gu Beiwei said in a low voice. Gu Beiwei had never really taken Gu Beiwei seriously, but when he heard this, he reevaluated him. In his eyes, any doctor who wasn't interested in medical school was a good doctor. He laughed heartily. You've got guts. This old man likes you. Gu Beiwei smiled faintly and began chatting with Gu Qisha about medical school. As they talked, Gu Beiwei said, Lord Pill Fiend, the wind is too strong at the entrance. Please come inside. Gu Qisha walked in with a perfectly justifiable reason. At the same time, Han Yunqi had already been brought to the Gu clan's garden by Lil Feng. Han Yunqi had been here once before and had left in a hurry, so she didn't know that Gu Beiwei had hidden such a medicinal herb garden in his home. Every blade of grass and every tree in the garden was filled with medicinal herbs, and all of them were flowering herbs. It was midsummer, so the garden was filled with colorful little flowers, and the air was filled with the faint fragrance of medicinal herbs. The stone path, the lawn, the flowering shrubs, and the shade of the trees were all beautiful to Ningjing. No matter how upset he was, he would be gently soothed here. Han Yunxi finally understood why Lil Thing would come here every day. She sat down on the swing under a large tree and gently swayed back and forth. After a long while, she finally exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, releasing all the pent-up frustrations in her heart. She felt much better. Actually, she didn't know why she had come to the Gu clan. She just wanted to leave the Duke of Qin's residence for some fresh air. In the entire capital, aside from Gu Beiyue's residence, she didn't know where else to go. Of course, Ningjing didn't take long before Gu Qisha's voice reached her ears. Hee, using medicinal herbs as flowers, Imperial Physician Gu Shur is elegant. It can't compare to Medicine Ghost Valley's blooming flowers, Gu Beiyue replied modestly. Hee, your place is too plain. Tomorrow, this daddy will give you a few stalks of beautiful purple and brilliant red, evergreen all year round. Gu Qisha seemed to be in a good mood. Han Yunxi knew that Gu Beiyue wouldn't be able to stop Gu Qisha, but she didn't expect that the two of them would actually strike up a conversation. She swayed back and forth on the swing as she watched them walk closer. Esteemed Wang Fei, there are still some areas in Pill Fiend Pharmacy's blueprint that this lowly official feels need to be changed. Since His Excellency Pill Fiend is here, this lowly official will bring it up to him. Gu Beiyue explained why he had let Gu Qisha in. Han Yunxi was too lazy to chase him away, so she swayed on the swing without saying a word. Esteemed Wang Fei, this lowly official has prepared some refreshments. Please come to the pavilion, Gu Beiyue said. Han Yunxi had originally calmed down a bit, but when she heard the words refreshments, she suddenly felt suffocated again. She calmly replied, no tea, just water will do. If it were anyone else, they would definitely ask why, but Gu Beiyue didn't ask any questions. He silently ordered the servants to remove the refreshments and replace them with water. The three of them entered the pavilion and sat down. If it were anyone else, they would definitely ask, esteemed Wang Fei, why have you come? But Gu Beiyue didn't ask any questions. He simply asked, esteemed Wang Fei, did you bring the blueprint? When Gu Beiyue had talked about Long Fei Yi and Little Junior's sister at the entrance, Han Yunxi had been afraid that Gu Beiyue would ask her why she had come. But now, Gu Beiyue had misunderstood that she had come for the blueprint, so she no longer felt awkward. Where's the blueprint? She unhappily glared at Gu Qisha. Gu Qisha had originally wanted to use this opportunity to sow discord between this girl and Long Fei Yi, then explain the 10% antidote for the broomcorn millet poison. But now that this girl didn't seem as angry as before, he didn't have the heart to try and sow discord between them. He took out the blueprint and unfolded it on the table. The blueprint was covered in dots and dots of handwriting. There was Han Yunxi's, Gu Beiyue's, and even Gu Qisha's. Esteemed Wang Fei, take a look at this. This lowly one thinks that it would be better to change the layout and make it double in size, Gu Beiyue said seriously. Although Han Yunxi wasn't as angry as before, she still felt a little gloomy. She glanced at him and asked, Gu Qisha, what do you think? Gu Qisha thought about it for a long time, then nodded seriously. Indeed. Then change it, Han Yunxi said gloomily. Gu Beiyue and Gu Qisha discussed a few more areas, but Han Yunxi didn't seem to have the energy to continue and seemed to be lost in thought. Gu Beiyue glanced at Han Yunxi from time to time, but he soon changed the topic. A few days ago, I heard a really funny joke in the palace. How about I share it with the two of you? Han Yunxi didn't answer, so Gu Qisha casually asked, what joke? Once upon a time, there was a bear. It said that it was really, really cold. It was really, really cold. Gu Beiyue said seriously. And then? Gu Qisha asked. And then that's it, haha. Gu Beiyue laughed. Gu Qisha was confused. That's it? Yes, that's it. It's funny, isn't it? Haha. Gu Beiyue laughed heartily. Who would have thought that the humble, gentle, and well-mannered imperial physician Gu could tell a joke and laugh so heartily? Gu Qixia rolled his eyes and didn't want to waste any more time talking. Gu Beiwei, on the other hand, couldn't stop laughing. Han Yunxi, who had been silent all this time, suddenly spoke up. That's not cold at all. I know something even colder. Gu Qixia wasn't interested, but Gu Beiwei looked expectant. Is that so? This official is all ears. Han Yunxi perked up and said seriously, once upon a time, there was a polar bear that was sitting alone on the ice in a daze. It was so bored that it started plucking its fur for fun. 1, 2, 3, until there wasn't a single hair left. She paused at this point. And then? Gu Beiwei asked curiously. Take a guess. Han Yunxi deliberately kept him in suspense. Gu Beiwei shook his head. I can't guess. And then it cried out. It's so cold. Gu Beiwei was stunned when he heard this, while Han Yunxi burst into laughter. She laughed even harder when she saw Gu Beiwei's stunned expression. It's very cold, isn't it? Ha ha ha. Gu Beiwei maintained his dazed expression, but a gratified smile flitted across his eyes. Cold jokes were not meant to entertain others, but to entertain oneself. The person who told the joke would always laugh louder than the person who heard it. Gu Qixia really didn't find it funny, but when he saw Han Yunxi laughing heartily, he pretended to shiver. It's so cold. It's so cold. It's so cold. Ha ha. As he laughed, Gu Qixia's interest was piqued. I'll tell you one too. Once upon a time, there was a eunuch below. Can you guess what happened? Han Yunxi thought for a long time but couldn't think of anything. Gu Beiwei guess. Gu Qixia asked. Gu Beiwei didn't say anything, so Han Yunxi asked suspiciously, Don't tell me it's gone too? Gu Beiwei couldn't help laughing when he heard this, but Gu Qixia burst into laughter. Han Yunxi, you're a genius. Han Yunxi couldn't wrap her head around it. She pondered for a moment. Once upon a time, there was a eunuch below. That's gone? Gu Qixia laughed so hard that his stomach hurt when he saw her confused expression. Ha ha ha. Han Yunxi finally realized what was so funny. She grabbed the drawing and threw it at Gu Qixia. You're shameless. She looked at Gu Beiwei and saw that he was holding back his laughter. Gu Beiwei obviously already knew the answer. All right, she couldn't help but laugh. She had to admit that this dirty joke was amazing. Her gloomy mood unknowingly relaxed, and she didn't even realize it herself. However, just as they were laughing, Gu Beiwei's expression suddenly changed. He then pulled Han Yunxi into his arms. Almost at the same time, several arrows flew into the pavilion from all directions. Assassins! Chapter 484. Assassins! Whether it was Han Yunxi or Gu Beiwei, neither Gu Qixia had expected an ambush from an assassin. At this moment, they did not have the luxury of time to think too much as the rain of arrows was extremely fierce. Gu Qixia did not care if Gu Beiwei lived or died. He held Han Yunxi tightly in his arms. One hand wrapped around her while the other pulled out his sword and continuously deflected the arrows that were flying towards them. Almost at the same time, the sound of fighting could be heard from nearby. It seemed that the hidden guards protecting Han Yunxi were fighting with the assassins. Gu Beiwei. Protect Gu Beiwei. In the midst of her panic, Han Yunxi still remembered Gu Beiwei, who had no strength to truss a chicken. No matter who these assassins were, if they were not here for her, then they were here for Gu Beiwei. Gu Beiwei was innocent. She was tightly pressed against Gu Qixia's chest and could not struggle at all. Even breathing was difficult, and she could not see the situation around her. However, she could hear the whooshing sounds of arrows flying through the air as well as the sounds of Gu Qixia's sword clashing with the arrows. She knew that the situation was very urgent, and there were at least 100 archers lying in ambush around them. Gu Beiwei did not know any martial arts at all. Forget 10,000 arrows. One arrow would be enough to kill him. Gu Qixia, save Gu Beiwei. Gu Beiwei, I beg you, save Gu Beiwei. Han Yunxi had never cried before, but at this moment, she was so anxious that she was on the verge of tears. Fortunately, Gu Beiwei was not injured because Lil Thing was protecting him. Lil Thing's speed was much faster than Gu Beiwei's, and its tiny figure constantly flashed around Gu Beiwei like a white shadow. The moment the arrows got close to Gu Beiyue, they all fell to the ground as if they had been bitten in half. Han Yunxi had not guessed wrongly. There were indeed many archers in the area, and they were not using ordinary bows and arrows, but the very rare crossbow arrows. There was a big difference between bows and crossbows. Bows and arrows were shot in a parabolic arc and required both hands to operate. Without strong arm strength and endurance, one would not be able to shoot arrows over long distances and would not be able to fight for long periods of time. However, a crossbow was different. A crossbow was very small and could be operated with one hand. It relied on mechanical power to shoot in a straight line and had a long range. Moreover, its explosive power was very strong and its lethality was also very high. Compared to a long bow, a crossbow was much harder to dodge. The combined destructive power of a single crossbow arrow was comparable to the combined destructive power of 10 bows and arrows. It was unknown how many archers had sneaked into Gu Beiyue's courtyard, but it was not an exaggeration to describe the situation in the pavilion as a rain of arrows. If they were not careful, neither Gu Qisha nor Lil Thing would be able to protect Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue. When he heard Han Yunxi's cry, Gu Beiyue's gentle gaze became indescribably gentle. To him, such a dangerous situation was nothing to be afraid of. Unfortunately, neither Han Yunxi nor Gu Qisha had noticed the change in his expression. Gu Qisha was completely focused on dealing with the crossbow arrows and was annoyed by Han Yunxi's disturbance. He shouted angrily, "Your poisonous beast is protecting him so he won't die. I'm about to die from your noise, so shut up." Poisonous beast? Lil Thing. Han Yunxi finally remembered that Lil Thing was here as well. Her heart finally settled back into her chest. With Lil Thing's skills, it should be able to protect Gu Beiyue. But Han Yunxi didn't shut up. She said, "Gu Qisha, take me away from here, quick." She and Gu Beiyue had to leave the Gu estate immediately. That way, Gu Beiyue would be safe. The enemy had to be prepared for such a sudden and fierce attack. They wouldn't let them off so easily. "Where are we going? This is the safest place. Hold on for a while, the soldiers will arrive soon." Motherfucker, even Long Fei Ye's guards couldn't beat them. Heaven knows how many people are lying in ambush. This old man can't hold on much longer. Gu Qisha was telling the truth. Chu Shifeng had probably followed Han Yunxi here again. If even he couldn't stop the enemy's attacks, then the enemy must have made thorough preparations. Moreover, there had to be plenty of archers and assassins lying in ambush. Under these circumstances, they had no choice but to place their hopes on the Imperial Guards. Something so big had happened in the capital city, so they'd definitely be alerted by now. As long as the Imperial Guards arrived, they'd have no problems keeping their lives. Hearing Gu Qisha's words, Han Yunxi understood the situation even more. She was anxious, but helpless to do anything. Poisons and assassination weapons were useless in a situation like this. If only she knew a bit of swordsmanship, that would be great. She couldn't help but think of Long Fei Yi. Where did that guy and Duanmu Yao go? What are they doing now? Why isn't he here right now? In the midst of the fight, an arrow pierced Gu Qisha's shoulder and narrowly missed hitting Han Yunxi, who was in his arms. Gu Qisha's shoulder had just been injured, but he pretended as if nothing had happened and continued to dodge the arrows. Han Yunxi was buried in his arms, so she didn't see or feel a thing. Gu Beiyue furrowed his brows as he watched. The small flying dagger hidden in his hand almost flew out, but in the end, he didn't make a move. Lil Thing stopped, but in that moment of distraction, a sharp arrow pierced Gu Beiyue's shoulder. As the arrow entered, blood spurted out. Gu Qisha's black robes couldn't be seen, but Gu Beiyue's white robes revealed everything clearly. The arrow's wound worsened along with his blood. The design of this arrow was too strange. Only the heavens knew where it came from. It was really difficult to deal with. Gu Qisha's attention wandered for a moment, and 2 arrows pierced his back, causing him to spit out blood. However, he remained unmoved and continued to block the arrows as if he hadn't been injured at all. On the other hand, Lil Thing squeaked when it saw that Gu Beiyue was injured. Frightened, it didn't dare to linger and flew over, turning into a white blur that circled around Gu Beiyue from left to right. Lil Thing grew angry as well and cackled. It wanted nothing more than to pounce on the surrounding archers and bite them to death. But that was the nature of an arrow attack. Once you were outnumbered and outgunned, you had no choice but to keep dodging and evading. Hearing Lil Thing's cries, Han Yunqi asked anxiously, "What's wrong? What's wrong with Imperial Physician Gu?" Gu Qisha's body trembled at her words, and he suddenly asked, "Lass, why aren't you worried about me?" Han Yunqi suddenly realized that his tone sounded familiar. She was about to ask when Chu Shifeng's voice carried over. "Esteemed Wang Fei, are you all right?" Chu Shifeng was already heavily injured, but he'd still managed to break through the encirclement. He and his guards had long been ambushed and couldn't take it anymore, so he'd sent in the archers to sneak into the flower gardens. The enemy had not only brought archers, but assassins as well. Currently, the guards were still fighting with the assassins outside, so Chu Shifeng had sacrificed a dozen or so of his own men to force his way inside. He dodged the arrows as he made his way towards the pavilion, but soon enough, a black-robed, masked assassin appeared and raised his sword to block his way. Chu Shifeng had no choice but to retreat. Very soon, he and the assassin were fighting to the death. Han Yunqi's thoughts were interrupted by Chu Shifeng. By now, Gu Qisha had recovered his composure. He didn't know what had gotten into him, but he'd almost changed his voice. So close. Soon, the attack of the arrow rain was already very fierce, and it continued to intensify. The number of arrows gradually increased. If there were no reinforcements, they would either be shot to death by the arrow rain, or their stamina would be exhausted, and they would still die. They desperately needed reinforcements. Finally, Gu Qisha couldn't take it anymore and raged. "Are the Dog Emperor's Imperial Guards all good for nothings? Why aren't they here yet?" It would have been better if he hadn't spoken, because his words only intensified the rain of arrows. At the same time, Chu Shifeng was kicked off the ground by the assassin, who crashed heavily onto the ground. Fortunately, he could still get up. "Your Excellency Pill Fiend, hold on. I've already sent word. The Imperial Guards will be here soon." Chu Shifeng shouted. Gu Qisha could only grit his teeth and hold on. His martial arts skills weren't very good, so he turned around to face Gu Beiwei with his back. Gu Beiwei immediately sucked in a cold breath. At some point, 5 arrows had pierced his back, causing blood to flow non-stop. In his shock, Gu Beiwei also noticed Gu Qisha's blood. He knitted his brows and seemed to realize something as his expression grew more and more serious. Finally, just as Gu Qisha was about to give up, the Imperial Guards arrived. It wasn't clear how the guards and assassins outside were doing, but the sounds of fighting had already stopped before Gu Qisha's group even saw the Imperial Guards. The assassin distanced himself from Chu Shifeng and shouted, "Withdraw." The rain of arrows immediately decreased by half while he himself retreated. Chu Shifeng didn't chase after him, but cut down a few more arrows before charging into the pavilion to help Gu Qisha. Gradually, the number of arrows grew smaller and smaller. Soon enough, the sounds of fighting rose up around the garden again. Most likely, the Imperial Guards were dealing with the archers who hadn't retreated in time. Gu Qisha wasn't holding on so closely, so Han Yunqi could finally breathe in some fresh air. She looked at Gu Beiwei and Lil Thing, then at the scattered arrows on the ground and sighed. This sudden turn of events was like a nightmare. By the time everything stopped, Lil Thing was sprawled on the table, panting for breath. It had almost died from exhaustion. Chu Shifeng was lying paralyzed on one side, his body heavily injured. Gu Qisha was still holding on tightly to Han Yunqi, who struggled to free herself. Besides Gu Beiwei, who was still focused on Gu Qisha's blood, the rest of the group was more scared than hurt. At this moment, the leader of the Imperial Guards and a group of archers emerged from the flowers to appear in front of Han Yunqi's group. The leader of the guards wasn't Mu Qingwu, but a young officer. He didn't approach them, but knelt far away from the pavilion. "This soldier came too late to save you, esteemed Wang Fei. Please forgive me." Although he knelt, the archers behind him didn't. Han Yunqi was still feeling that something was off when Chu Shifeng suddenly cried out, "Esteemed Wang Fei, be careful. It's a trap." As soon as he spoke, the kneeling young man waved his hand. All of the archers knocked their bows and aimed at Han Yunshi. None of them expected the Imperial Guards they'd been waiting for to change sides. Gu Beiwei was about to throw himself at them when Gu Qi pulled Han Yunshi into his arms again and turned around, exposing his back to the arrows. Swish, swish, swish. Heaven knows how many arrows sank into his back. This time, he didn't need Han Yunshi to urge him to run out of the pavilion with Han Yunshi in tow. Now that the Imperial Guards had changed sides, this was the most dangerous place. Chapter 485. Gu Beiwei used his back as a shield to escape the pavilion with Han Yunshi in tow. However, the archers surrounding the pavilion didn't chase after them. Instead, they drew their bows and surrounded Chu Shifeng and Gu Beiwei. What's going on? Not good, it's a trap. Esteemed Wang Fei's in danger. Chu Shifeng reacted quickly. Instead of chasing after Gu Qi, these people had trapped them instead. Without a doubt, they wanted to silence them and prevent news of the Imperial Guard's betrayal from spreading. At the same time, there had to be a trap waiting for Gu Qi to jump into it. Their methods were ruthless, so vicious. Judging from the current situation, Chu Shifeng was certain that Duanmu Yao's appearance wasn't a coincidence either. She was probably trying to lure His Highness Duke of Qin away on purpose. It was very likely that Chu Tianyin was the mastermind, but Chu Shifeng couldn't figure out how the man could mobilize all the Imperial Guards in Tianning. The young commander stood up and said coldly, "Guard Chu, you never thought you'd have a day like this, did you? Do you think you can hide the truth by wiping out our mouths? Do you think His Highness Duke of Qin is a vegetarian?" Chu Shifeng rebuked. "My family's master isn't a vegetarian either." The young commander smiled as he backed away step by step. It was obvious that he was about to give the order to fire the arrows. Gu Beiwei's warm gaze turned icy as he prepared to attack. But right at this moment, there was a gust of wind as a sharp sword flew through the air and pierced through the young commander's stomach. Impudent thing. Very soon, Mu Qingwu flew over from nearby to land by the young commander's side. He yanked out his sword and kicked the corpse aside as he asked anxiously, "Imperial Physician Gu, Guard Chu, where's esteemed Wang Fei?" Mu Qingwu had been collecting evidence with the Crown Prince at the ruins of the black market for the past few days. He just returned when he heard that something had happened to Imperial Physician Gu, so he personally led his troops over. Along the way, his attendants reported the situation to him, and he rushed over at the fastest speed in his life. However, when he arrived at the Gu mansion, he discovered that the Imperial Guards had betrayed him and colluded with the black-clothed assassins to set up an ambush at the entrance of the Gu mansion. After all, he had tens of thousands of Imperial Guards under his control. As soon as he arrived, the black-clothed assassins had retreated and the rebel army had fled in all directions. He had given the order to pursue and capture them, but he had not dared to stay for even a moment. He had directly rushed in, afraid that something would happen to the Princess Consort. But who would have thought that he would not see her after arriving? Gu Qi rescued esteemed Wang Fei. They're heading west, so there's definitely an ambush waiting outside. Hurry. Hand me over, and I'll definitely be able to restrain him. Catch the ringleader and catch the thief, understand? Han Yunqi said seriously. Although she was being protected, she hadn't been idle at all. She had been constantly analyzing the situation and thinking of a way to deal with it. What if? Gu Qi asked. What if? Han Yunqi didn't understand. What if they kill you right away? Gu Qi asked again. I don't think they're here to kill me. It looks more like they're here to kidnap me, Han Yunqi said seriously. More like? Are you gambling with your life? Gu Qi scoffed. Han Yunqi was silent for a long time before she answered seriously. I'm gambling. I'm gambling. I won't allow you to gamble. Gu Qi suddenly became very angry. As he spoke, he hugged Han Yunqi tightly and pressed her against his chest, as if he was afraid that she would leave him at any moment. Han Yunqi's face was pressed against Gu Qi's chest, and she could hear his strong heartbeat. She wanted to struggle, but no matter how hard she tried, She couldn't move an inch. The sound of the wind breaking filled her ears as countless arrows flew past her, each one of them fatal. Life and death were separated by a fine line, but she couldn't help but admit that she felt safe in this unfamiliar embrace. Once again, an indescribable sense of familiarity filled her heart. However, Han Yunshi quickly regained her senses and said coldly, "Gu Qi Sha, you're the one who's courting death. If you continue like this, only death awaits you." She had cheated him out of half of Pill Fiend Pharmacy and broken the rules that had been inconvenient for him for more than 10 years. Shouldn't he hate her? Shouldn't he take this opportunity to take revenge on her? Why was he protecting her so desperately? Even if they were working together, there was no need for him to be so loyal and use his life to protect her. Han Yunshi loathed Gu Qi Sha's current behavior. She felt guilty when he acted like this. She would rather Gu Qi Sha be a wicked old man forever. "I won't die," Gu Qi Sha said unhappily. Han Yunshi would never have guessed that this was the truth. It wasn't a joke, nor was it something he said out of anger. He really wouldn't die. She could only feel the stench of blood on his body growing stronger and stronger. It was so strong that even she, who had never been afraid of blood, was beginning to feel afraid. "Gu Qi Sha, if you die, who's going to save me? If you die, I'll die too." Han Yunshi tried to goad him into action. Gu Qi Sha was slightly stunned, but he still replied angrily, "Han Yunshi, remember this, I won't die. I won't die. I'm not in the mood to joke around with you. I don't want to die yet. Don't try to show off and harm me," Han Yunshi deliberately said harshly. Gu Qi Sha still didn't answer and continued to fly forward. Soon, they reached the end of the alley. The end of the alley was actually a determined look flashed across his eyes. He followed the bloodstains to the third floor and soon arrived at the door of a room. However, when he kicked in, he found that there was nothing in the room. Where is he? He immediately kicked open the doors of the surrounding rooms. His actions were swift and ruthless. He naturally had to be on guard against Han Yunshi and the others using poison. Unfortunately, after kicking open more than 10 rooms, he found that they were either empty or occupied by someone who was having sex on the bed. If they were not enjoying themselves, how could they not have heard such a huge commotion in the brothel? Could it be that they had escaped from the brothel? The black-clothed expert was about to leave when he saw that the door to the room at the end of the corridor was tightly shut. He did not give up and carefully walked over. After preparing his crossbow, he viciously kicked open the door. "Who is it?" The man on the bed immediately roared. The black-clothed expert walked out from behind the screen and saw an extremely beautiful man on the bed. He was half-naked and was lying on top of a woman. The woman was clearly frightened and was curled up in the man's arms, shivering. Her face was hidden. The black-clothed expert seemed to recognize this man. He was slightly startled but quickly regained his senses. His sharp gaze swept across the man and woman on the bed. Although both of them were naked, the silk quilt covered their bodies, so he could not see everything. The man's legs were long and slender, full of strength. The woman's legs were fair and well-proportioned. One above the other, and the other below, they were intertwined. Of course, most of their bodies were still covered by the silk quilt. The man's shoulders and arms were exposed, and one of his hands was propped up on the bed. The woman's hair was disheveled, and her sexy collarbone was faintly discernible. Such a lively scene. But under the black-clothed expert's sharp gaze, the atmosphere became tense. However, the extremely beautiful man soon narrowed his eyes dangerously and said coldly, "Do you want to die?" The black-clothed expert's gaze was complicated. He looked around the room again and said coldly, "My apologies for offending you." He slowly retreated. However, as soon as he heard the sounds of soldiers coming from downstairs, he quickly retreated and fled. At this time, the two people on the bed breathed a sigh of relief. That was close, that was close. Under their feet, there was a pile of bloody clothes and a medical kit hidden in the bed. The most conspicuous thing was the black robe that was soaked in blood. Beside the medical kit, there were also a few medicine bottles scattered. The man's other hand was propped up trapping the woman between his arms. He narrowed his bewitching eyes, licked his lips naughtily, and stared at the woman below him with interest. That expression was like a wolf that had trapped a sheep, ready to tear it apart and eat it at any time. It had to be said that although this wolf looked thin, his figure was definitely first class. His exposed chest muscles were clearly defined, tempting one's imagination. However, this woman was not interested at all. Her brows were tightly knitted, and her eyes were red. She stared at the man's face, as if she was about to cry. "Poison lass, you don't have to thank me. If you're touched, why don't you repay me with your body?" The man smiled. The woman almost threw a punch at him, but fortunately, she stopped in time. She angrily said, "Goo, get down right now." Big brother, I really don't wanna." Goo sighed softly. "Do you want to die? Hurry up and get down. I'll treat your wounds." Han Yunqi said angrily. She never thought that Gu Qisha was actually Gu. When she heard Gu's voice at the entrance of the alley, she could not believe it and thought that she had misheard. But now that they were here, in order to avoid being hunted down by the black-robed men, they hid in a room and cleaned up the bloodstains as quickly as possible. Gu Qisha took off his black robe, black mask, and his bony fake hands. Only then did she confirm that he was really Gu. The situation was urgent, so she did not have time to be shocked. She hurriedly treated his wounds to stop the bleeding. The two of them had taken off their clothes and put on a show to fool the black-robed men. Now, she wanted nothing more than to hang this guy up and interrogate him. Why did he have to use two identities to trick her? She treated him as a friend, but he dared to lie to her. What was his motive? Of course, she did not have time to be angry or question him. She had to hurry up and treat Gu's wounds. The arrow wound on his back was too terrifying. She had only used an emergency hemostatic medicine to stop the bleeding, but the medicine would wear off very quickly. "You, get down here." Han Yunqi's tone was commanding. However, Gu did not move and only looked at her with a smile. If Han Yunqi had been paying attention, she would have noticed that Gu's smile was especially blissful. Unfortunately, her attention was completely focused on his arrow wound. "Are you getting down or not?" Han Yunqi threatened coldly. She was so anxious that she did not mind his teasing and had even forgotten about her disheveled clothes. "Poison lass, let me hug you for a while, okay?" Gu asked seriously. Han Yunqi was angry and was about to push him away when Gu hugged her tightly and buried his head in her bare and warm shoulder as he whispered softly into her ear, "Poison lass, Chi brother, I really like you." Han Yunqi was stunned by his words and was about to open her mouth when Gu sighed, "I want to die in your arms." Originally, Han Yunqi did not know how to face his seriousness, which she had never seen before. However, after hearing his sigh, she couldn't help but roll her eyes. "Gu, will you die if you don't joke around? Don't think that I won't dare to do anything to you just because you're seriously injured." After she said that, she decisively pushed Gu away fiercely. However, Gu did not have much energy left, and with her push, he fell sideways onto the couch. He was bare-chested and his trousers were still on, but they were rolled up very high. Han Yunqi was the same, and her outer garment was wrapped tightly around her chest. Once the quilt was pulled away, the two of them could not be considered naked. Gu weakly turned over and sprawled on the couch. Han Yunqi looked at his back, and her heart suddenly throbbed with pain. It was so painful that even breathing was difficult. When she was trying to stop his bleeding earlier, she did not take a good look before hastily applying medicine. Now that she took a closer look, she saw that his entire back was covered with arrow wounds. Each wound was as big as a thumb, and some were deep and some were shallow. Some had even started to bleed. It would not be an exaggeration to say that his entire body was covered in cuts and bruises. When faced with such a situation, as a doctor, her first instinct was to quickly treat the wounds and stop the bleeding. However, at this moment, she pursed her lips tightly and tried her best not to cry. When he saw that Han Yunqi was still not moving, Gu Qisha turned to look at her. When he saw that her eyes were red and she looked like she was about to cry, his smiling eyes suddenly softened. "Poison lass, don't worry. I won't die." Han Yunxi finally regained her senses and glared fiercely at him. Lie down and stop talking. She quickly took out 5 large life-saving medicinal pills and gave them to Gu. Normally, she would only give 1 small pill during first aid. Only the heavens knew how frantic her heart was under her calm exterior. Gu smiled. Poison, lass, isn't this too nutritious? Don't try to show off. Han Yunxi personally fed Gu the pills and ordered him to lie down and not speak. In her opinion, this guy was only trying to show off by being able to laugh and joke around. How could he still have the energy to joke around when he was so heavily injured and had lost so much blood? Gu obediently lay down and snuck a peek at her. Although he did not say anything, he was smiling faintly and looked especially blissful. Han Yunxi had prepared a pile of medicine, gauze, and cotton swabs. Everything was done neatly and professionally. However, when she sat down cross-legged next to him and was about to treat him, she could not help herself in the end. She covered her mouth and turned her head to the side. Her heart ached so much. For the readers, Jean Mo's Sina Weibo account name was I am Gina Mo. They would not be able to find it by typing in Gina Mo. Chapter 487. Heartache. Heartache was unable to describe how Han Yunxi was feeling at this moment. The number of patients she had come into contact with in both her previous and current life added up to more than 10,000 people. She had seen many who were more severely injured than Gu. She was a very dedicated poison doctor, but she wasn't a good-tempered one. Every time a patient screamed out in pain or fear, she would reprimand them. How could it not hurt when he was injured? There was no use in shouting. He would never recover if he didn't get treated. But facing Gu's back, which was covered with arrow wounds, she felt heartache for him. It was all to save her, otherwise this fellow wouldn't be in such a state. If she wasn't so useless and knew some martial arts, or had better poison skills, this fellow wouldn't have been injured so badly. Besides feeling heartache, Han Yunxi's heart was filled with guilt and self-reproach. Gu saw that she was about to cry, and he was so happy that he laughed. Poison lass, cry if you want to. He liked it when she cried for him. If she cried only for him, he would be even happier. This fellow was already in such a state, and he was still so shameless. Han Yunxi glared fiercely at him and ignored him as she immediately started to treat his wounds. Gu's back had too many injuries, and they were all thumb-sized holes. They were densely packed and were all badly mutilated. God knows what those people's arrows were. Once they entered a person's body, they immediately rebounded and fell like a sword, causing a second injury and increasing the rate of bleeding. Han Yunxi was afraid that once the effect of the emergency hemostatic medicine wore off, Gu would lose a lot of blood. Although this fellow was still trying to show off his ability, his face was already very pale. She made a prompt decision to apply another round of emergency hemostatic medicine and started to treat each wound carefully from top to bottom. Previously, when she applied the medicine to avoid the black-robed expert, the situation was urgent and Gu didn't feel anything. But this time when the medicine was applied on his wounds, Gu really felt the pain. It was so damn painful. He had been afraid of pain since he was young and was extremely afraid. However, not only did he not show it, he even laughed and turned to look at Han Yunxi. Poison lass, your eyes are clearly red, and your heart is aching. You bitch, get down on your stomach. Do you want to die? Han Yunxi immediately cursed. It was not because she was embarrassed and angry that her eyes were red, nor was it because she was worried about his wound. She was just depressed that this guy was about to die from his injury. Why was he still so restless and teasing her all the time? The wound would bleed once the medicinal effect wore off. If it wasn't treated within an hour, this fellow would definitely die from excessive blood loss. You only know how to show off. You only know how to tease. Her heart ached so much. Why didn't he feel any heartache for himself? Gu suddenly stopped laughing and asked faintly, Girl, are you afraid that I'll die? She didn't know if Han Yunxi was too serious to hear her, or if she heard her and was too lazy to answer. In short, she ignored her. Gu also stopped joking and obediently laid down on his stomach and closed his eyes. He was indeed powerless, but it wasn't fatal. He had an immortal body. As long as he was willing, not to mention one batch of crossbow archers, even if there were 10 batches, he would still be able to meet the arrows head-on and kill them all. But he had to hide the secret of his immortal body. He could only carry Han Yunshi and escape. He could only pretend that he was extremely weak and stubbornly try to show off. Although this woman's poison skills were exquisite and her medical skills were average, but if he wasn't careful, it was very possible that she would discover something strange. At this moment, Han Yunshi had already treated 2 wounds, disinfected, applied medicine, and stopped the bleeding. The wounds were densely packed, and she couldn't bandage them one by one. She pondered over whether to quickly treat all the wounds, or she would have to wrap Gu up like a dumpling. Of course, although she didn't say it, she was not only concerned about Gu's wounds, but also his complexion, pulse, and mental state. Although he was seriously injured, this guy did seem to be in good condition. She only thought that Gu was just trying to show off. In addition, she had already given him 5 large life-saving medicinal pills. With Gu's physique as a martial arts practitioner, his performance wasn't too abnormal. The room was silent. Gu's entire body relaxed, but Han Yunshi's nerves were taut. Her entire body was tense, and her hands didn't stop moving for a moment. She was nimble and straightforward, precise and experienced. So far, the wounds she treated weren't deep, so it was easy to treat. She even forgot that she had a wound on her right shoulder as well. Because the arrow had been shot so deeply, the 3 Cun bolt was still embedded in her flesh. Gu Qixiao was probably too happy to notice it. At this moment, Han Yunshi found a very deep wound. She had just used disinfectant to clean the coagulated blood when a gush of blood spurted out. She panicked and decisively took out the strongest medicine to stop the bleeding and sprinkled it on the wound. Gu quivered and his body trembled. His bloody skin and flesh were lacerated. When the medicine came into contact with the blood, it bubbled. Gu was in so much pain that he couldn't bear it. Although his smile was ugly, he still grinned. "Poison lass, are you plotting to kill me? Plotting to kill me?" He was in so much pain, and he could still say that. Han Yunshi really wanted to tell him that she was convinced, but she didn't have the time. She looked serious as she continued to apply medicine while plugging the wound. However, the bleeding didn't stop. She didn't hesitate and immediately applied anesthesia on Gu. This wound had to be stitched up, and the sooner the better. Without anesthesia, Gu Beiyue's wound became numb and the pain gradually disappeared. He secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He didn't know how Poison Lass had tormented his wound, but he was very relieved. After a moment of silence, he couldn't help but turn back to look. Of course, he couldn't see Han Yunshi's hand movements. All he could see was Han Yunshi's serious little face. "Poison Lass, you're quite scary like this. Poison Lass, what are you doing? Poison Lass, how long will it take? I'm a little hungry." Han Yunshi didn't pay him any attention. He was simply talking to himself, but he seemed to be enjoying himself. As he spoke, his gaze couldn't help but move downwards and fixed on her naked neck. It was fair and delicate, as clear as ice and jade. He realized that this woman had a very nice-looking collarbone. He couldn't help but stare blankly and gradually quieted down. At this moment, footsteps were heard from outside the door. It seemed that the soldiers had arrived. A trace of displeasure flashed past Gu's eyes. He suddenly grabbed the blanket and covered Han Yunshi and himself completely. Han Yunshi was busy stitching up his wound and being disturbed. She got angry. "What are you doing? So be it if the soldiers were here. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to find him in the entire city." She was about to pull the blanket away when Gu suddenly flipped over and pulled her back. "Sure. Are you intending to get someone to catch us in the act of adultery in bed?" Although he was frivolous, he still cared about her reputation. Han Yunshi immediately stopped. There were many things that couldn't be explained away, especially this kind of thing. It was better not to explain at all. If she didn't explain, it was better to hide it. Hence, one was lying down while the other was kneeling. With the blanket covering them, the 2 people in disheveled clothes put on a lively and fragrant show. When the soldiers barged in, they didn't see Han Yunshi's face, who was covered up tightly. They only saw Gu's bare arms and a look of pleasure on his face. He was enjoying himself very much. The officer glanced at them disdainfully. Seeing that there was no one hiding around, he went out. After making sure that the person had gone far away, Han Yunqi hurriedly got up and locked the door. Gu slowly turned over. The half-stitched wound was gushing out blood again. Damn it! Han Yunqi was angry and distressed. She regretted it. How could she be so muddle-headed in a moment of desperation? She really shouldn't have let Gu turn over. If she was caught in the act of adultery, so be it. If her reputation was ruined, then so be it. He wouldn't kill a traitor out of anger. If the traitor was dead, who would they find to force out the mastermind behind the scenes? This was clearly a move to silence them, but Long Tianma had no reason to suspect Mu Qingwu. Many of his men wanted the Duke of Qin and Qin Wangfei dead, but Mu Qingwu would never do that. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.